because all this like my brain is like as you explain all this, I'm like, but like in the movie, I'm just like, oh, he did this, the okay, yeah, it's time travel. Welcome back to Not My Fantasy, the show where we talk about fantasy films and the lore that inspired them. I'm Cullen,
And I'm Hannah.
and today we're here with one of our beloved grad school professors, the one who basically engineered us meeting. So, in the butterfly effect, that's why we're all here
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
Speaking of time travel, Scott Thompson, thank you for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, and I get to take full credit for this show existing. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Our friendship existing. I mean, yeah,
Yes.
you get to take
yeah,
credit for a lot of stuff.
yeah. Put it on
We
your
actually have our
LinkedIn.
first students that are getting married next month that met in our program.
Oh my gosh.
First ever, yeah.
Oh my
So Debbie and I
goodness.
are going to the wedding.
Oh,
Oh
that's
my gosh.
awesome.
Yeah.
So you can take responsibility for their relationship and marriage as
I
well.
told them that pretty much.
So we're here because we're transitioning from we're fully transitioned from Cinderella month to time travel month.
Hmm.
I have one final statement. I realized that in Cinderella, the animated one and three, she shows delegation skills. That means she could probably be better at running a business than Camila Cabello's Cinderella. Guess what? Our guest
Mm,
Andrew was like, "Show me her business skills if that's her plot." And
yeah.
I'm like, "Wow, just realized that." But we're here to talk about a very different genre. We're in time travel month, and we're starting with the ultimate time travel movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. No.
Whoops,
Oh
I'm on the
gosh.
wrong place.
Wrong Zoom call.
Can I go back to the future and figure this out?
We're talking about 1985's Back to the Future, but I feel like we haven't
Hmm.
touched on the 80s are actually one of my favorite movie decades. I feel like it's like in the pop culture window. I noticed this in the grad program. Like people talk about 90s movies and 70s movies. I'd be like, I have no idea what you're talking about. But I knew a lot of 80s movies because that's when my mom was young, like when she was a teenager in her early 20s. So like throughout my childhood, she'd be like, oh, like it's time to watch War Games. It's time to watch Pretty in Pink. It's time to watch
Yeah,
Karate Kid. And so I love an 80s movie.
Yeah.
same.
I was
That's
just,
1985 is the year I graduated from high school, so I was right there with Marty.
you were in the
Yeah.
same graduating class as Marty.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah. Was he a senior then? I don't know.
I think so. Well, he was 17, so
Okay.
junior or senior, one of the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, this movie came out in 1985, so a full that's 30 years before Chicken Little, yeah.
Mm.
Our timestamp.
That's
And
how we measure time on this podcast.
How
yeah,
far away from Chicken Little?
everything is based on Chicken Little. And I feel like so when I was watching this movie, I was like, I think, is this my first time seeing the beginning of this movie? I could have sworn I've seen the whole thing before, but I feel like I've seen it on TV so many times that like the
Mhm.
beginning, I was like, this is new content to me. I was like, yeah. Scott, how often have you seen this movie?
A fair amount. Probably so many that, I mean, I grew up watching it. We didn't have as many movies. We didn't have streaming. So if you
Mm.
if you bought a VHS at that time of a movie, then you watched it many times. There was a time when I would watch like Jaws and Back to the Future like every other year or something, just
Mm.
because it just brought me back to a time in my life when, I was about the age of the characters. Too many times is the answer.
I think, did you teach Back to the Future for a little bit in our
I
first
touched
class?
on it.
Yeah.
The thing that I I think I talked about was the idea of entering another realm.
Mm,
That, when a story enters another realm, you can almost stop the plot. I don't know
mm,
if you want me to go into that stuff, but there's a period when he goes to 1955 where the plot really stops because he hasn't caught up to where he actually is. He doesn't really
yeah.
know what's, he doesn't know the details of what's happened. So they just have fun with it.
Hmm.
Gas station has like 8 people working at it. It's like a pit stop, the
Uh-huh.
Texaco station. And in
Yeah.
1985, even you would just slip your credit card into now you don't even have to see a person.
Yeah.
Uh, so he saw the gas station, he goes into the diner, and he's like, what will it be? And he's like, give me a tab, and he's like,
Yeah.
you
It's
can't
like,
get a tab unless you order something. The tab was such a popular drink back then,
yeah.
which I don't think it had a small window tab. But
Yeah.
they just having fun with it. They called him Sailor because he was wearing that vest.
The life
So
preserver.
I was trying to
yeah.
see if I had a life preserver
Oh,
or a
where?
vest to wear, and I had gotten rid of
We have to go
mine.
back to
Yeah,
1985.
so I have to go back to that. So
I
I
think I
did I
might have
do
had one of those. Maybe not the color, but so yeah, it's just like the story actually kind of takes a pause in terms of plot, and you just have
Mhm.
fun with the character entering this other realm.
Yeah.
So there's many movies that do that, and that's a really good example of that.
Yeah. We'll definitely talk about that probably in all, well, maybe not Time Traveler's Wife. Spoilers for the future because that movie's not fun. Um, but yeah, like we'll definitely talk about it with our next movie and whether or not the script allows us to have that fun with those characters, or if they just jump right into the plot.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. Yeah, you didn't give us a whole lecture because I mean, we paid good
no.
money for that lecture.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't give it away for free.
So we'll post your Venmo link and people can send $1.50 for the mini
Or maybe I
lecture.
send you back money.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, it went through development hell, and I'm sure there are plenty of podcasts that are going to be better research talking about like all the steps of development that I was reading about on Wikipedia. And so I'm like, I don't need to recite that Wikipedia page because we're here to talk about the time travel lore. But it was inspired when the co-writer Bob Gale was looking at a high school yearbook and wondering if he would be friends with his parents when they were teenagers and noticing that like his mom's stories didn't always line up. Which is something I noticed like with my dad, like he loves to tell stories about his childhood and then his siblings will be like, oh, that sounds great. I wonder whose childhood that was.
Which is interesting. He wrote a book, right? Your
Yeah.
dad wrote a book about his so did his
Wow.
siblings fact check? I wonder.
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, I want Aunt Bridget's version, you know?
Yeah, I always worry about that with my kids. They're just like, wait, someone just told a story that you never told us, and that was about the same time as that happened. Yeah. We leave out little pieces.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It tells a better story. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was directed and co-written by Robert Zemeckis, Romancing the Stone, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Death Becomes Her, as well as he directed every CGI nightmare like Christmas Carol, Polar Express, Beowulf, the live-action Pinocchio remake, the
Wow.
Disney one. Yeah,
The one with Tom Hanks?
yes.
Oh, wow.
And it was written by Zemeckis and Gale and produced by Bob Gale and Neil Canton. It starred Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly, who was Eric Stoltz was initially in the role and was recast.
Yeah, he was a problem to work with, apparently.
And he's
Yeah.
not funny.
Well, there you
Yeah.
go. So also I put in this note, considering that we used to have a Glee podcast, we had you on. Eric Stoltz actually directed multiple episodes of Glee, including one where I'm pretty sure, I don't remember what episode it was, but there was a lot of camera work where we're looking up like cheerleader skirts during a dance number, and we're like, no. So ever
Yeah.
since then,
Wow.
Eric Stoltz, no,
He's
thank
like
you.
one of the only directors I remember because every time it was him, you'd be like, this was him, and look what he's doing.
Yes, exactly. I developed a personal vendetta against him in that show for some reason. So,
Yeah,
But
the
his
purple.
approach to everything is not light, and the movie Back to the Future is very light.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christopher Lloyd is Doc Emmett Brown. We have Leah Thompson as Lorraine and Crispin Glover as George and Thomas Wilson as Biff. It dominated the box office for several weeks. It was a huge success, made $388.8 million on a $19 million budget.
That's
It was like
crazy.
in an era of they're talked about a lot of youth-based movies were coming out, but this was a hit because it kind of had something for everyone. But it wasn't as raunchy as a lot of movies were. And so a lot of execs didn't think it would be a success. And then like when they pitched it to Disney, they're like, we don't like the thing with his mom is a little much for our brand. And then other people are like, it's not raunchy enough. But it made Michael J. Fox like a breakout star. It spawned two sequels. They are insistent they will not be making a fourth.
Cool.
Thank goodness. Yeah. Video games, an animated TV series, and a West End musical.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
what happened to that musical? Is it moving to Broadway or
I
is
think
it
so.
done? I
Right?
haven't heard anything about it in a little while.
I mean, if Bad Cinderella can,
Yeah.
what
Um,
else? What are the standards?
Yeah.
It was widely loved. It was criticized for like Reaganism, materialism, and like safe Americana.
mhm.
Um, but in the popular consensus, most people, it's a very beloved movie.
Yeah. Did you see it in theaters, Scott?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Just because it came out at that time, and movies didn't go to video for quite a while. It
Right.
was that that transition was sometimes a year. I don't know how long it was for that specific
Oh,
movie, but
wow.
it would play in the theaters for 4 months or whatever.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
they're
if
talking
you
about like
want to like go
seven
down
week
to cheaper
runs.
theaters, what's that?
They're talking about like a 7 week run, like it was dominant for like 7 weeks, you know.
Yeah,
And
right.
now it's like a movie, like if you don't catch it on like the first 2 weekends, you're like, is it even still in theaters?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, and I mean some are going straight to streaming, but yeah, I mean so they wouldn't sell the VHS tape until they had drained all the money out of the theaters, you know.
Interesting.
So if
Yeah.
if it was a say you had an Oscar nominated film, they'd wait until that cycle because you get more viewings in the theater. So yeah, VHS tapes or even CDs didn't DVDs didn't come out for quite a while after the movie was released in the theaters.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Yeah, I know it's
Hmm.
so strange to think like I have all these DVDs, that I keep up in our place in Maine because we're kind of off the grid. And it's just that's how we did everything, like you
Yeah.
went to a video store and picked up a
Hmm.
movie and you had it for a window of time and you were supposed to rewind the VHS tape. There was a
Hmm.
Yeah.
little thing that said be kind, rewind.
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 Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a Jack Black movie.
yeah.
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 Um,
I mean, we were talking about that with, oddly enough, Cinderella Through a Twist in Time because the Disney direct-to-video sequel was directly related to Disney's initial hesitance to release their movies to like VHS, and then they're like,
yeah,
"Oh wow, we make a lot of money out of this."
yeah.
Like, what else can
Yeah.
we put on there? So let's talk lore. So Oedipus, we're not we're
I
not
didn't
telling the
even,
story
I'm
of
excited to see here what
I was
Hannah.
like, I didn't even think about going there. And so I just saw your note and I was like, oh my God, that is a great way to open this. But no,
Yeah.
we're not talking about Oedipus.
I think the Oedipus complex is a hack. I think he was a hack. I think that's a lie. I'm just gonna say it. I'm gonna say it on here.
Hot
So
take.
yeah,
Uh, yeah. So I did the research for this lore,
yes.
and this is sort of the disclaimer and also how this episode is going to run because there's a ton of science philosophy on time travel. I am not an expert. I
Mm.
also read a lot of Wikipedia. So I am going to be front loading a little bit with some concepts and theories that we'll talk about throughout us talking about the plot. And I'll chime in sort of at various points when those things are relevant. And I'm going to kind of just like pose questions to us to kind of get us looping into like all the crazy theories about this movie because it's so interesting to talk about time travel and how things get affected, especially in one of like the most popular time travel movies. Also, we will not be cinema sinsing this on whether or not it's accurate because
No, no,
there
no.
is no consensus in the physics community about like what can happen with time travel, how it can happen. There is no consensus. There's no reason
True,
to
true, true,
cinema
true,
sins
true.
it.
No.
So
The
don't hold
time
me to
travel made sense in Cinderella 3 for me, and it made sense in this too.
exactly,
I was like,
exactly.
all right, I get it.
So I'm going to start with a little bit of some literature. So some of the early stories of backwards time travel in around 1640, there was Supplement to the Journey to the West by Dong Yu. It features magical mirrors and gateways that the protagonist can travel through to different points of time. sort of, I guess, like a time portal or a wormhole. But the protagonist travels back to the Qin dynasty to get a magical bell, and then they're going to travel forward to the Song dynasty, and eventually it just kind of, we find out that, oh, this is all just a dream, which is actually really common for different time travel literatures, that like, oh, they just kind of dreamed about it. They went to sleep for a really long time and they woke up in a different time period is also another common one.
And Overly Sarcastic Productions has a great animated retelling of Journey to the West. So if you're trying to catch up on that story,
Yes,
that's where I'll send
So,
you.
so if it was a dream, then it never happened, then you don't have to worry about time travel.
exactly. That's how
You're off the
the
hook.
loophole. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You don't have to explain all the science.
Yeah, it didn't really happen.
In 1733, Memoirs of the 20th Century by Samuel Madden. It's an epistolary book that is a series of letters from British ambassadors in the years 1997, 1998. And they're basically talking about the state of the world in politics and religion in the 90s, and it's sent back to
Mm.
someone in the 1740s. So
Ooh.
I'm dying to read that to see how accurate or inaccurate it was. But that's sort of another one, is sending information backwards in time or forwards in time.
Mm.
Even the idea of a time capsule is a version of time travel, right? In 30 years, you may open a time capsule that has like letters from, little kids who went to this elementary school or something like
Yeah.
that. It may have a DVD or a VHS, and then you'll be like, great, I can't play this. I have no way to do that.
Right.
And then in 1838, a short story written by an anonymous author, was published in the Dublin Literary Magazine, is about a man who is waiting for a coach to take him to Newcastle upon Tyne. And somehow he's just transported back in time like over 1,000 years. And he meets the Venerable Saint Bede in a monastery. And this guy's like, hey, this is what my present looks like. I'm giving you insights into the future. And then they don't tell you whether or not it's a dream or whether it was really happening. So,
Fun fact about Bede, though, it's Easter season.
yes.
And the goddess Easter, the only record of her we have is from his memoirs or his descriptions.
Oh, wow.
Perhaps this short story, maybe that guy tells Bede about this goddess.
Yeah. He's like, people are really into Easter,
In my time, they're really into Easter. Yeah,
Easter. And he's like,
exactly.
oh, let me make a reason for that for you. He's like, why is it called Easter? He's like, I don't know, but I can make something up. Like, it makes sense.
And so there's also a lot of other, pop culture and literature, up even till now, but also still like back in the 1800s, that also deal with time travel. And we'll talk a little bit about stuff that's like way, way in the past, like in mythology in some of our future episodes. But there is a book called Time Travel, A History by James Gleick. I wasn't able to get it in time to record this episode, but I'll probably be reading it as we do the next few episodes. So hopefully I'll have some additional goodies from that book, but definitely check out that book.
Did he time travel to write the book?
You
Like
know,
he's like, I time travel and talk to the person who invented time travel fiction.
I guess I'll have to find out.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
That's exciting.
So now I'm kind of going to front load a little bit with the physics of it all. So again, there's no consensus on any of this stuff as it relates to relativity, quantum mechanics, space-time continuum, all that stuff. Again, not going to CinemaSins it. I just want us to have a fun conjecture. So there are a couple things that I want to talk about. So the theories of relativity. There are two: special relativity, which I don't really go into very much, and general relativity, which I will talk about a little bit more. But basically, the theory of relativity is that there are geometrical and physical science that purports that time travel could actually be possible. And this is thanks to Einstein, the dog in this movie. He kind of popularized this theory.
Yeah.
Some of general relativity actually suggests that there are various ways to travel faster than the speed of light, which could make time travel possible. And so going at the speed of light, it's sort of like opening up a wormhole, which is sort of what happens in this movie. But why faster than the speed of light? Okay, so according to the hypothetical scenario, the tachyonic antitelephone, it's when a signal is sent at the speed of light or slower, the signal is received after it's been transmitted. So basically, when I text Cullen, he gets that text slower than the speed of light after I've already sent it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with the tachyonic anti-telephone, when a signal is sent faster than the speed of light, it's actually received before it's even been transmitted. So if there was a way that I could text Cullen
That's awesome.
so fast that he would actually get it before I even sent it, thus it kind of technically travels back in time. So that's pretty cool. And then Stephen Hawking, he's talked a lot about the theory of relativity and physics, stuff like that. He just plain out argues that the fundamental laws of nature prevent time travel. And we'll dig into that in future.
Boring.
We'll dig into that in
Fuck him.
future episodes.
Yeah, he's not
But he was
invited.
literally just like, boo, I don't
Wait,
believe in that.
was he the one who threw a party for time travelers and no one came? And so he said that was because I wasn't it him? He like threw a
I
party
don't
for
know.
time travelers and no one came. I only know this from a meme because something
That's
came
great.
out about him and his wife and him like not being very good to her or something. And they're like, that's why none of the time travelers came because they knew.
They knew. That's funny. I mean, yeah, one of the other theories that's just like journalists is like, well, we have never even heard of or seen time travelers in our present. So then that obviously means they're not real, which it's like they're among us. You know, you could literally argue that. So
True.
there are a lot of people who are like, boo, this can't be possible just because we haven't seen the evidence of it. So
Yeah, I think one of the
yeah.
things we'd see is maybe some of the things that have gone down in life maybe wouldn't have gone down the way they have. No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
maybe Hitler wouldn't have got the chance to do what he did, you know.
Exactly. That's another common one is like, okay, well, if a time traveler existed, why didn't they come back and stop Hitler? And it's just
Well,
like,
what if
listen,
Hitler was worse in the initial timeline? What if Hitler
that's
won?
exactly. There's so many like there's a multitude of
Oh
other
God,
arguments.
that's
Yeah.
terrible.
It's oh gosh. Oh, my brain is breaking, but I love this.
I always think of
Alternative universes and like an infinite worlds.
yeah,
Like, could there be a version of history where things were even way worse?
Man in
And
a
so if
High
you think,
Castle. Yeah.
yes, exactly. Yeah.
That's what my aunt always, because my uncle used to always be watching World War II stuff on History Channel, and I remember my Aunt Maria being like, "Spoilers: Hitler lost. Don't go
Yes.
for the line."
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's great.
That's funny.
So I have just a couple specific concepts that we will talk about throughout our discussion. So even with the physical possibility of time travel via space-time, many scientists still believe that time travel to the past isn't possible because of all these different paradoxes that can get created. So we'll talk about a couple of those. But one of these things is time dilation, which demonstrates how time passes differently based on gravitational situation, I guess.
Is
We
that Narnia?
Oh, it could be.
Mm.
Narnia could be an example of that. We get the
Yeah.
example in this movie, with
Um,
the synchronized clocks, and then
Oh
suddenly
yeah, I'm
Einstein's
in.
is a minute behind. So we'll talk about
yeah.
that. The compossibility principle,
Mm.
which states that what did happen in the past cannot change. So whatever the time traveler is experiencing is limited to whatever has already happened. So whether or not this movie agrees with it or is sort of arguing against it, we can talk about. And then the grandfather paradox, which describes if a time traveler goes back to the past and kills their grandfather, they prevent the existence of their parent and thus killing themselves, auto-infanticide. So we'll also talk about that, even though it's not grandfather, it's father.
Um,
It's very fascinating. And then alternative universes and the multi-worlds interpretation. So we talked a little bit about alternate universes last week on Cinderella 3, A Twist in Time. But the AU theory states that other universes exist aside from our own, where alternative events have taken place in the past, and thus creating alternative versions of the present and the future. But some suggest that there are infinite alternative universes, lined up just like the slightest little flutter of a butterfly's wing, different things
yeah.
change. And then the multi-worlds interpretation, basically by traveling to the past, you immediately enter an alternative universe other than your own. So is that what happens in this movie? We'll talk about it.
Okay, so But I have the other thing we're talking about, like multiple universes. I remember having a conversation about this with Alyssa, our friend Alyssa, in the BU, like the student center, and
Okay.
talking about like if hell is real, are there multiple heavens and hells for each universe, or like is there a version of me in hell and a version of me in heaven, and do I know other versions of me also in heaven?
Wow, it's a deep
Whoa.
conversation over lunch.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, I mean, there's so many brain-breaking things to talk about when it comes to alternative universes. And my brain
Mhm.
did break a little bit when I was writing these notes. So I'm just
Yeah,
excited to break our
yeah.
brains together.
Yeah, I did not. I barely passed my high school
So
physics. So all this, I'm like,
the what is it called? The grandfather
The grandfather paradox.
paradox. So isn't that somewhat of a loop, though? If you kill your grandfather, then you don't exist, but then
how do
if
you
you
go
don't
back
kill your
to,
father, then you exist, and then you kill your grandfather.
It's yeah,
yeah,
there's like no solution to it. That's why
Yeah.
like no one could come to a consensus because someone could say, "Oh, time travel isn't possible because you could kill yourself." And then someone could say, "Well, if that's going to happen, then you wouldn't exist anyway." And so
Right.
like where's the
so
start?
I feel like then the alternate universe thing is almost like the cheat code to that, because like, oh, you just killed an
Yeah.
Right,
alternate
right.
universe version.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah. So
immediate explanation. Yeah.
there are so many other theories and principles. I mean, I didn't even get into quantum mechanics. I
No,
barely touched the surface when we talk about the DeLorean. It's just fun stuff. That's all we're doing. No
yeah,
cinema sins.
we are a fantasy movie podcast.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
this is a light comedy, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow. So now that my brain is shattered, let me pick up
yeah.
the pieces and go through the plot of this movie. So welcome to something that was this is the first universe, I guess, where I'm seeing the beginning of Back to the Future. I was like, wait, this is how it
I
starts.
also didn't remember this either. It's so weird.
I feel like my brain was like the DeLorean in the parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's that, I think it's partly because the beginning of this movie is such a slow boil, and
Yes.
Michael J. Fox, like at the dinner scene, he's barely present. Like I was thinking that
Yeah.
like he is not the protagonist in that scene. He's just
Mhm.
sitting there, he checks his watch, he's eating his breakfast or whatever. He's not doing anything.
Yeah.
His dinner or whatever.
Yeah, that scene, I mean, we'll get to it, but that scene is literally just to give us information to be like, oh,
Yeah.
in the future of the movie, it's like, oh, that's interesting. She was a good girl back in the day.
Yeah.
Maybe she wasn't such
Hmm.
a good
Yeah.
girl, you
It,
know? Like, yeah,
yeah.
it's just an information dump.
Yeah.
I texted Hannah that it was this movie is that old Vine, the whoever threw that paper, your mom's a hoe. Because it's like she's like, I would never act like that. And it's like, huh? Uh yeah, I think it was also like I feel like now fiction in general, not just movies, but television, novels, like everything is like dump me into the action. And this,
Hmm.
was a little more retro in that it paints a picture of the world. Like we get the credits of like rolling through the house, and we see all the clocks, we see all his weird inventions, we
Hmm.
see the planting of that plutonium was stolen by
Yeah.
potentially Libyan terrorists are taking credit for it.
Yeah, the
um
news says, but it wasn't Libyan
Oh yeah, they explained it
terrorists.
away. It was a clerical error or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is now, that's honestly what we think quite often, more like when they try to explain something away to get, so we don't get worried about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so we see the house, and then we see, Marty comes in, and it's like, oh, there's all this dog food. He's been gone for days. Where's Einstein? He's just kind of hanging out in the house. He plays a giant speaker and like
Yeah.
blows himself up, or not blows himself, but like flies through the wall.
Yeah.
And he gets a call from Doc that's like, oh, can you meet me in the mall, the Twin Pines Mall at 1:15 a.m. He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, and he's like, oh, the clocks are all going off. He's like, oh, perfect. They're all timed exactly 25 minutes late. And he's like, wait, what? I'm late for school.
Right, and there's no explanation for that. Like you talk
No.
about like explaining, it's not as though his time travel capabilities have anything to do with those clocks back at his place. So it's
Mm-mm.
like, why are all the clocks 25 minutes? Yeah.
He's a goof. He's a
Yeah,
weirdo.
He's just so smart that he's able to do that. We don't need an explanation.
exactly.
I do love one of my favorite things in movies is the amount of things teenagers are able to do before school starts. Like
Right?
school
Oh my
starts at
God.
like 7:15 a.m. Like what? Time to go to a second location.
Yeah, so if school starts for him at 8 a.m., he had time to eat breakfast
Yeah.
and get ready, skateboard to his friend's house. His friend, the disgraced nuclear physicist, who is like 50 years older than him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, which is never explained. Is that ever explained in the sequels? Because I've never seen the sequels.
That it's a really weird relationship, you're saying?
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah,
how did
like
they become
why?
friends?
Yeah, how are they friends? Why are they friends? Why aren't mom and dad a little concerned about the the
And
old
his
man?
girlfriend Jen, she's like, "Oh yeah, Doc,
Yeah,
that's normal that my boyfriend is friends with a 60-year-old disgraced nuclear
who
physicist."
lives like in a garage in the back of a Burger King, like
It's so
with
funny.
like it's like fenced in, I mean, I know it was
Yeah.
his property when he was a child or whatever, but it burnt down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
No, no,
wild.
they never tackle that. Amongst other
Okay.
things, I'm sure we're going to talk
Right.
about that. They never just. We'll just hope no one sees that. You know.
I was,
No one
for
thinks about it too hard, hopefully.
I feel like at like work when you're a teenager, you like have adult coworkers and you don't really fully grasp that like
Yeah.
you're a child and they're adults when you're talking to them, like unless they're your boss, and you're like hanging out with them, like, yeah, whatever. And in hindsight, you're like, oh my gosh, I was like 16. They're probably like, whatever this kid is saying.
Yeah. And
Uh
there would also be a ton of conflict between two people so different in age, like they probably wouldn't get along quite as well as they do.
I think
Yeah.
because he's a weirdo. I think
So
that's because it's like
that
it's fun. It's not
he's
like
childlike.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, he's late to school. He's skateboarding. This allegedly, this movie made skateboarding more popular. Uh,
Mm.
that's
Yeah,
a
that's
Wikipedia fact, so I gonna need some stats out there. But he's late to school. He sneaks in. We meet his girlfriend Jennifer Parker and the principal, who's mad that he's late and is like, "You're a slacker. You'll always will be just like your dad. No McFly ever amounted to anything."
His father
which
wasn't a slacker though.
He was a
no.
nerd.
Yeah.
And
That was my thing when
I
the
was like,
principal.
wait, his dad wasn't a slacker.
but also this man looked exactly the same in the 50s and that he does in the 80s, and I was like, is this guy like ageless?
Well,
Yeah.
he
Because
made a joke about it. He was like, "Did he
his
ever have hair?" Like,
yeah, and I was because I thought I was like, oh, he was a classmate of George McFly's. That's how he would know that. No, he was the principal or assistant principal. And I was
yeah.
like, what? So
I
that
Have you
guy's
mean,
ever gone
suspicious
back
to
to a
me.
school and you see a teacher that just hasn't like aged at all? I mean,
Yeah,
maybe it's
when I came
maybe
back
it's one of
to
those.
visit you, I'm like,
Yeah,
wow, it looks the same.
forever young.
Scott hasn't done so well.
You and Debbie look just like I remembered.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I think it's like we think of the 50s as so incredibly far away, but I mean for him it's like a 30-year
Yeah.
gap, which is a long time, but also like he could be an adult in the 50s and still be an adult in the 80s,
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, that's the thing that always gets me is someone was like, the 2000s are as far from now as the 80s were in the
Yeah, I know.
2000s.
I don't like that.
I mean,
Yeah.
one way they dealt with the same kind of thing is that I think in the beginning of Back to the Future 2, sorry for going into another movie, is that Doc peels off his skin and says he has this like aging thing, and he's the exact same face. He's like, "How do I look?" And he goes, "Great, Doc." Like he doesn't look at all different, and he's been trying to.
He's late for school. Afterwards, he has like it's a not a battle of the bands, but like he has an audition with his band to see if they make the school dance, and the people are like, "You're way too loud to play at the
I
school
love this
dance."
moment in the movie because Huey Lewis was so big at that time, and he's in
Yeah,
the movie as the judge who's like, you
yeah,
know, pissed off about them hacking up his song. I thought that was awesome.
yeah,
Little Easter egg.
Yeah,
yeah.
his girlfriend's like, "Why don't you just like send your music to a record label and so you can get a
No,
record
no,
deal?"
no. She says to the record company. The record
Oh,
company. And I was like,
the
ah, yes,
one.
the
Well,
record
in
company.
1985, there was only one record company.
Yeah.
That's
And
But
also
he
like a 17-year-old's version of the world. Like, like it's that
exactly.
yeah.
easy. if you
Yep.
really want to do it, you know.
Children.
Yeah, right.
And he's like, I can't take that kind of rejection. What if they don't like it?
Mhm,
And which is, a plant.
mhm.
And they're talking about going to the lake this weekend and that he's hiding it from his mom. He says going camping with the guys, and they're about to kiss, and they're interrupted by the historical society, just like shoving a pamphlet at them, trying to save the clock tower that hasn't been working. And they're like, it's history that it doesn't work. It needs to be preserved. Uh, and we see mayoral ads, and she writes her phone number on the pamphlet. Now, yes, this is a long intro, but this is a lot of great planting for things to
Yes.
explain how he knows that there'll be a storm, and like explaining to us, the audience, so we're not like, oh, that's convenient.
Yeah. And
This
we're
this film may have more plants than any other film. I
yeah,
mean,
because
Yeah,
literally every single line of dialogue, move, character, thing that happens is a
yeah.
plant that we use later on in the movie.
Yeah, yeah, because like her writing her number on that pamphlet, he's going to take that pamphlet into the past. So he's going to have that information, but also proof of this girl that he loves. The mayoral ads are for Goldie, and he's
yeah.
going to meet him, which yeah, it is. There are so many
Oh
plants.
yeah, it's
Crazy.
basically everything. I mean, the Uncle Jailbird Joey,
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
I was
the
going to
whole
add something about like self-fulfilling prophecies in that. I was like, does Marty technically create a self-fulfilling prophecy by telling this toddler, get used to these bars,
yeah.
kid?
But it's also just wonderful for us to have that,
Yeah.
insight. Even the little kid is wearing like a black and white striped shirt,
And
like
she's like, oh, he loves his crib, so
yeah,
just
yeah,
leave him
yeah,
in there.
yeah. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about this movie is the dramatic irony. I don't know if we're going to get into that, but that's one of the coolest things about time travel.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have fun with the premise without getting lost in the weeds of
Yeah.
how it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
Uh
That's our job today.
That's our job to say. So he gets home, he sees the car's total, the car that he was supposed to take Jennifer to the lake with. And he sees it's because his dad's bully slash manager, Biff, took the car out for a drunk drive and totaled it.
Yeah.
And is like, no, your insurance is gonna pay. And he's like, Biff, hello, like he does, or he's like,
Yeah.
hello, McFly, and he
McFly.
like bangs on his head, like, anyone in there? You got to get my papers or my reports done so I can put them in my handwriting and turn them in. And so his dad's like a total pushover, like lets Biff walk all over him. He's drinking beer in his house. He's like, I totaled your car and you only, or I tow your car all the way home and you only have light beer for me. And just
And
like
then
he's like,
there's a
oh,
comment as he's walking out, say hello to your mom, which leads us to the ending.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Uh, so
Which is interesting because Marty at this moment does not know what that context is.
Right. So
And
he should be upset,
yeah, and he's just like annoyed that Biff is existing in his house. But like coming back to that from what he knows now, it's like that's a really fucked up line to
Yeah, right,
say
right.
to someone's kid, let
Yeah,
alone the fact that it happened. Ugh,
yeah, yeah, no,
horrible.
right, right.
yeah, we have a family dinner. We meet his siblings who are kind of like depicted as like kind of unhappy slacker types.
Mhm.
And his mother is an alcoholic. She's unhappy. The dad's just like watching TV. Um,
We hear about how they met.
they met that he was hit by a car by grandpa's car. She doesn't know why he was in the street. And she said he looked so cute. And then they went to Enchantment Under the Sea dance and they kissed.
Mhm.
And everything, the rest is history. And
Was he a peeping Tom on her? Like, was he watching her, or
I
was it
think
just
so,
someone?
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's
So that
implying.
just makes the beginning of the relationship grounded in real health.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So it's this kind of unhappy, like dysfunctional family. And he's upset because he can't take his girl out to the lake in the car. So he falls asleep and he almost forgets to go meet Doc, but he goes to meet Doc at the Two Pines Mall, which is not actually very far from where I live, because I was like, that JCPenney looks familiar.
Oh wow. Yeah, great
That's
product
fun.
placement. There's so much product placement in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also, I mean, we'll talk about it when like the terrorists show up, and I was like, does JCPenney love this product
Yeah,
placement right
yeah.
now? Because it's a little questionable for them, but I mean, it probably paid
I'll just
off.
say that we were dumber in 1985.
And
Less
also,
insightful.
this is also sort of a time capsule because I don't know, maybe in like 10 years, there will be no more physical JCPenney stores because so
Yeah.
many department stores are just shutting their physical locations.
Right.
So very
Department
interesting.
stores are depressing typically.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the photo booth that they disappear right before they slam into it. Though that was a thing, right?
Yeah,
When you
the like the
to
film
develop your
development station.
photos, and you'd have
Yeah.
some creepy person, looking at your photos of developing them. I remember
Uh-huh.
having. It was just a weird thing. I remember having photos developed. Like my family went on a vacation, and he hands me the pictures, and he goes, "You really shouldn't let your child. You should use sunscreen with your child. You shouldn't let them burn." And I'm like, okay,
Okay.
weirdo. I'm never having my pictures developed here again. Like, what
Oh,
are you checking out the pictures as it was super,
Okay.
I felt
yeah.
so violent. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? You know, okay, note to myself, never have my photos
Right.
developed here again.
Now, like, like film cameras though are like a retro thing that
Yeah, yeah,
kids will
Yeah.
like bring out.
yeah.
One of my cousin-in-laws is always taking pictures with like the film camera.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, they're at the mall. He sends Einstein the dog. Doc sends Einstein the dog 1 minute into the future and back. Uh,
Yeah.
and Marty is like, "You just killed your dog. You just killed Einstein." And he comes zooming back, and he's like, "Yeah, this is my time travel machine. It runs on plutonium." Which I got because I convinced these Libyan terrorists I was going to make a bomb for them. And he's like,
The
"What about the
throwaway terrorists of the time, Libyan.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah,
And he's like, "Well, how do you know? Like, aren't they gonna come back?" He's like, "Oh no, like I tricked them. They don't know."
yeah. I'll never find
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
I
He's
bet
so
I
convinced.
I bet I talked about Back to the Future in this portion as well. This is one where I just think it's genius that remember when he calls Marty, well, to wake him up, he says, "Don't forget my video camera." And that
Mm-hmm.
whole video camera of Marty documenting. So Marty is from an
Mhm.
outside point of view and doesn't know what he's been up to. So he's asking questions like, why a
Yeah.
DeLorean, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also videoing the whole thing to document it. So it's a great way for us to get all the information about how this could have happened in the world of the story, which I think it's such a clever move. And it's just bringing, and also the video cameras later on used,
Mm-hmm.
um, by Marty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in this moment, so he syncs the clocks. He syncs his clock with Einstein's clock, makes sure he has his seatbelt on, and then, he sends him 1 minute into the future. And so this is where we see the time dilation, because when Einstein comes back, his clock is 1 minute behind. And that's because he sent him going at the speed of light, and he arrived instantaneously in his spot. But for Marty and for Doc, it was a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. So that's sort of like showing you that, like, okay, time passed very differently for both of these people, Einstein the dog, and then them. And so they've experienced time dilation.
I just wonder, okay, so when Marty went back to 1955,
Hmm.
everything moved at the speed of time while he was there. If he was wearing a watch during that time, that watch would also be passing through time.
He,
So why is
yeah.
Einstein's watch? He left for a minute, but he experienced the minute, right?
No, he went
So he jumped over it.
instantaneously. Yeah, he
Right.
jumped over that minute. So he experienced less time than they did because
Right.
he went from boom, boom, and then
He
they
didn't
only saw
experience. Right.
him.
So it's different
Yeah.
than mine. Yep. Okay.
In the simplest sense, this time dilation, the unsynced watches, is sort of proof of time travel into the future and this is, they can kind of prove this with mathematics as well, which I'm not going to get into. But yeah, so time passes slower in the spot where the time traveler left, but it passes super fast for them because they skip over that time.
But they do explain it, I mean,
Yeah.
they have a version of it. It's not really,
Yes.
I mean, the flux capacitor is the thing. I mean, that's a joke in our family. Whenever anything's broken, we're like, I think it's the flux capacitor that's not working. Even if it's like a dishwasher, you know?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So he explains it that he needs the 1.21 gigawatts and the plutonium and the flux capacitor and the stainless steel surface of the DeLorean and all those things are, I mean, what I think they get away with is that he's so smart and he's dedicated so much of his life to this that the
Mhm.
flux capacitor must be a thing, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And then they just let it go there. They don't actually explain it, but they have something there to explain
Yeah.
it.
And they
Yeah.
have some scientific basis for this. Like, if, like, I can talk about it a little bit, but like how the DeLorean itself works, like there's definitely some scientific thought behind it that you're like, yeah, that works.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Because all this, like, like, my brain is like, as you explain all this, I'm like, but like in the movie, I'm just like, oh, he did this, okay, yeah, it's time
Yeah.
travel. Like,
Yeah, I mean, there's a
just
term
accept it.
in playwriting called a raisonnière, and it's a professional, like a doctor, a lawyer, a PhD, a scientist,
Yeah.
and that in playwriting or in film, when that character tells you something, as long as they don't have like a hidden agenda and they're not like
Mhm.
maniacal, whatever. But if they're just a character that we go to like say somebody in the story has cancer, and we go to the doctor and they say it's terminal, and usually we'd go for a second opinion, but in the movies
Yeah.
they don't. They just say, "Oh my
Yeah.
God, I have terminal cancer. It must be true because this doctor, we didn't go to this doctor and they were trying to kill us off or something, or they
Mhm.
Yeah.
have their only function is to give the truth. So that's what Doc. Part of what Doc is he gives such a seemingly logical
Mhm.
explanation that you don't have to think about it, right? Because
Yeah.
they want you to focus on the fun of the story. They don't want you to dig deep into whether or not it
Mm.
could happen.
And that's interesting that he's still a successful version of that role, even though, like, we saw his house. He's
Yeah,
a little kooky, but we
Spooky.
still trust him.
yeah.
And I mean, do you think like we only trust him because like we see that the time traveling machine works? Because if
Because
we
he's
Also,
as
hadn't,
surprised
then
as
it's
we
like,
were, right?
yeah,
He was like, "Oh my God, it really worked," you know?
yeah. So that's interesting that he's still like trustworthy to
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So when you
Uh,
combine the fact that he's this type of character and you're documenting it on video, it is a huge exposition dump, but
yeah,
it's motivated.
yeah.
yeah.
So one last thing about time dilation, which was the thing that I thought was most interesting, is called the twin paradox, where one twin remains on Earth and the other travels into space. And due to the acceleration while traveling in space, that space traveling twin actually returns younger than the Earth dwelling twin. So because less time has passed while they're in space, and then on Earth, time passed normally. Yeah.
That hurts your
I'm
brain.
I'm doing
Yes.
breathing exercises. Like, I'm doing like a heavy weight because I'm
Yeah,
like, this is like
it's
the isn't it a comic where Superman like goes fast and like puts the Earth in reverse? So
yeah,
and
yeah. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about time machines in the history of literature. So, one of the sort of the first depictions was in 1887, El Anacronopete by Enrique Gaspar y Rambau. This story actually features a vessel that is engineered to travel back in time. There's also H.G. Wells's The Time Machine from 1895. And actually, this is where I had some information from that time travel history book, where basically this book came before Einstein's theory of relativity, but this book was sort of playing with that idea, about I think 15-ish years before Einstein sort of proposed that idea. So it was sort of working with those concepts already.
I was gonna say I read that book as a kid, and I'm still traumatized thinking about the Eloy and the Morlocks. in my head. Not even the wishbone version could change it.
And then back in 1881, there was a story, The Clock That Went Backward by Edward Page Mitchell. And it's essentially a clock that you can wind back to transport you through time. There's no explanation of how the clock works, but that's sort of just a really early depiction of using some sort of device to transport you back in time. For those Harry Potter fans, reminds me of a time turner. So, fun fact. But let's talk about this DeLorean.
Okay.
I actually have a question. Were DeLoreans really cool in the 80s, or is that a joke?
No, they were like the affordable gull wing door car, you know. So DeLorean got in a huge amount of trouble. I think he was indicted for coke. So yeah, there was a huge issue with him. But my sister's boss actually had a DeLorean when I was in high school, and she would bring it home sometimes. And I was like, I want to drive that. I didn't even have a license, and she let me drive it. But I mean, just the fact that a car had gull wing doors immediately made it cool. It was also like it was stainless steel. There was no other car like that, and there was
Yeah.
only a limited amount of them made. So yeah, I mean, it was a novelty. You know, it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And it was like, you know,
Okay.
Ferraris are so expensive. DeLoreans were nothing compared to that in cost. So
Right.
you'd see them, you know, in an ordinary situation.
Yeah, because that's what he says. He's like, if you're gonna time travel, you might as well do it in style. And I see that car and I'm like, oh, okay, okay, 80s.
Yeah, right,
Uh,
right. Well, okay. We also had Devo and like our style
yeah,
was
it was
so
Well,
yeah.
so wild.
it's one thing I love about actual 80s movies compared to like for some reason 80s nostalgia movies tend to rub me the wrong way. But I love 80s stuff. And I think it's because like 80s nostalgia things, everything's like neon and colorful. And then like things actually in the 80s, everything's like brown. And like
Right,
and then you're like, okay, this is like a real place where people lived, not like
Yeah,
a roller rink.
right, right. And I mean,
yeah.
the DeLorean wasn't the original. It was like a refrigerator that they were going to use for time travel in the original script.
Oh, yes,
Very hot
Yeah,
yes.
tub time machine.
yeah, and they just thought it was too static, and so they thought the DeLorean would work well. And the DeLorean looks like at the time was a car, again, accessible car that kind of looked like a spaceship, you know, the way the
Yeah.
gull was open. So
Yeah. So yeah, he fits this DeLorean. It still has its normal engine that should technically run on gasoline, though it's not super clear in this movie. In future movies, that is explained. But in this movie, he says, "Oh yeah, it runs on plutonium," but he's clearly referencing like the time travel aspect of it.
except he runs out of plutonium and then the car doesn't.
Doesn't Well, that's a good question because I thought, oh, the car is just spazzing out in general because of all the electricity. It like fried the systems or something, not because it ran out of gas.
Then it
Because
wouldn't be able to go back to 1985.
yeah. But again, I'm not here to CinemaSins it. It's,
No, I know. I'm
whatever.
just saying, like, it definitely is a little like bump in the road of trying to figure out, like, why
Yeah.
would it, if it's running on plutonium, doesn't it have fuel, you know, just to
Yeah.
drive?
They conveniently needed to make it not run at
Ye-
specific times.
Well, they didn't want it to go into town because then it would have drawn a ton of attention to itself.
Yeah.
So they had to
True.
keep it, you know, they had to, just like they did to Jennifer in the second one. They just like they put her to sleep. Like, we don't really want you in the movie. In the second one, they open up and he's like, "Why did you even take her?" He goes, "I had to figure out something to do with her because she knew about the fact that we were time traveling." So he just knocks her out and they leave her in an alley like on a pile of trash while they move on with the rest of the movie. The
Oh my
That was a
God.
recast too at that time. But yeah,
Oh boy.
yeah. So his
Wow.
girlfriend was kind of just as women
Literally
in general
thrown
in this
out with the
movie are.
trash.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God. So the flux capacitor was really interesting because there is some etymological support to what this thing does. So flux is the quantity of a substance, for example, electricity. Capacitor is a device that stores electrical energy. So it is just a power reservoir that holds specifically 1.21 gigawatts of power. And it's just the reservoir to make the time travel happen.
And
Um,
gigawatts is a real thing.
yes,
I mean,
and
it's like a
so
billion watts, right?
yes, and so I did watch a brief video that actually talked about that it would take, where is it? I think it's six.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nuclear.
6 nuclear powered aircraft carriers from the US Navy to power the DeLorean time machine. That's how much energy it needs to power and do its thing, which is kind of funny.
And that's another thing that they changed, is that there was an original version where they went to a nuclear facility to get their power. And
Oh,
people thought that
interesting.
was a little too dark, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
This reminds me in high school debate freshman year we had to talk about energy and watts, and I was like, we're gonna replace all of coal with wave energy, and I like did my own math to be like, see, the waves will generate enough watts, and people were like, that's not really how it works. I'm like, but I did the math, so
Yeah. So
and
there.
didn't you say it was debate? You're just debating,
yeah,
So
yeah, that
you had your
wasn't.
argument.
The Christian Communicators of Michigan and Ohio League didn't really love my eco-friendly and no coal solution.
Oh, yeah. I think that's
Yeah,
like the second time in like a few episodes that you've talked about literally your
yeah,
speech and debate from school, from your homeschool
yeah.
program. Um, so yeah, the other thing about the DeLorean is that it needs to hit 88 miles per hour to trigger the release of energy from the flux capacitor to the flux bands, which are the bands that sort of appear around the car, to then create a wormhole that it can then travel through. And because in order to time travel, it has to travel at the speed of light, 88 miles per hour is just that trigger that gets the gigajolts or the
Gigajoule.
what is it?
Gigajolts.
Gigawatts. Yeah.
I like
Gigawatts.
gigajolts more though.
I was like gigajoules. I was like, no, I know there's the J sound
I
in
need
there.
a good gigajolt.
Yeah, gigajolt. It's a new
Gigawatts.
energy drink.
Honestly, though, it does sound like it.
It's not just a jolt, it's a gigajolt.
But the TLDR version is just the flux capacitor creates the wormhole for the card to pass through and time travel. And yeah, I mean, there's some like sound
Wow.
science to it that I was just like, I love that. It's not just completely totally made up. You could argue it. Yeah.
To give you some context of how cheesy we were in the 1980s, they were selling packages for those flux bands that you put around the DeLoreans. For people who own DeLoreans, they could attach them to their car. So if
Love
the
that.
DeLorean, if you're not sold on the DeLorean, well, how about a DeLorean that was turned into a time machine, driving around just like, on the Mass Pike,
I love that. The other thing that that we got to talk about is how they set the time. So the first one is where you're going to go, or I should say when you're going to go. The middle one is your current, like what your present should be, right? And then the last one is where you've just traveled from. So that's how they do it.
Science. You just convinced me time travel's real.
Yeah,
I mean, there you go.
I also love that so many of the labels are those cheesy 80s, like the thing, I don't forget what it was called, but you punch in, you dial the letter and you put it in. It's like the sophisticated time machine, and the labels are like this.
It's like the
50-cent
red
label machine.
Yeah, like the red with the white text. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and also the flux capacitor, it's just tubes that light up in a Y pattern, and that's it. Love it.
Yeah.
So
it's the Y to the universe.
there you go.
Yeah, he goes back to 1955, crashes into a barn at the Twin Pines farm, and they think he's an alien, from like one of the kids' comic books, and they start shooting at him, and he runs over in the car one of the pines.
One of the only 2 pines.
Yeah.
The thing that I was like, why is this grown man listening to his son? I was like, your son is the one who told you it was aliens, and now you're getting angry. But then I'm like, if you think about a DeLorean next to like a 1950s car, I'm like, okay, yeah, that does look like a spaceship. Like that's valid.
Yeah. I'm also very impressed, Cullen, that you were back on track. All of a sudden you started talking about the plot again. I'm like, oh yeah, we were doing something here. I was like, we went on like a tangent on a tangent on a tangent. You actually pulled us back in So
Yeah.
sorry for keeping it back off track,
Oh,
but
it's good.
I'm
That's what I'm here
impressed.
for. That's my job.
Yep. My job is to tangent us, and he's here to wing us back. But yeah, so this is where he's driving away, and the car is this when the car starts to
Oh,
stall, right? Like right in
Yeah,
front of his.
the
He tries to
sign.
go back to his neighborhood,
Because he's like, it's
but it
just a
hasn't been built
dream.
I have
yet.
a
Yeah.
huge problem. This is one of the biggest mistakes in the making of this movie that always drove me crazy. If you watch the scene in which he drives out of the barn, so he busts out of the barn, right, and then drives
Yeah.
over the pine tree. It is they're carrying lanterns and like it's pitch dark. By the
Yep.
time he gets to the end of the driveway, it is bright out like
Yes.
daylight, and it's not as though time passed. No, like
No.
it's 3 seconds, and if you, I mean, I don't know how Spielberg of all filmmakers would let that slide, but
Yeah.
they totally did.
Yeah,
This,
because it's like not the middle of the day, but it's bright out when he sees his old neighborhood or his
yeah,
neighborhood that hasn't been
right,
built yet.
right.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
immediately
Yeah,
after. If just watch the movie, I'm like, it blows my mind that they let that slide, and no, I have never seen anyone write about it or talk about it, but it blows my
that's why
mind
we're
that they let
here.
that
It's
slide.
right
Yeah,
here.
we're addressing something. It's never been
We
said.
have to talk about
I
this.
mean, go
Yeah.
back and watch that. It's like insane that if you were watching even a short film, like a low indie short film, you'd be like, you can't do that, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're a high budget.
Yeah. And there's not even really a way to justify it within the logic of the movie. It's
No,
not like because the mall isn't that far away from
Yeah.
where
right, right,
he
right. No,
lives
I mean, it's
because he
where
got there on
he
a
is because,
skateboard.
yeah, he's in the same space, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So
he's
Wow.
2 miles outside of town.
yeah. And so yeah, there's probably fewer roads from that area to hit where he would be, but like there's no way it would take it was 1:20 a.m. There's no way it takes 6-7 hours to
Yeah,
get across
right.
town
But he's
in
not
a
even
car.
across town. He's like at the other end. He pulls out of the driveway that is
Yeah,
the mall.
that's
That
wild.
will be the mall. Yeah.
Wow.
It just, I mean, I'd just say anybody who's listening to this, watch that and be like, how did the world not notice that
Wow.
immediately?
The
It
movie
We
took
is
me,
got,
what, I
perfect
don't know,
other than
100
that.
viewings.
Yeah,
yeah.
that is wild.
Yeah, because I didn't really even notice, but we got there before BuzzFeed. Take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We're always trashing BuzzFeed.
But yeah, so this is where like the car basically does the car stall and then he
Yeah.
hides it, right?
Yeah.
It runs out of plutonium. I mean, again, they need to tuck the car away because they
Yeah.
can't let him drive that thing through town and
Yeah.
Yeah.
cause an uproar.
So yeah, let's talk about some more time travel stuff. So he does appear on the same exact land where Twin Pines Mall was built.
Hmm.
So that's sort of how the time travel works, is that you go to the exact single space, like physical space where you were just a second ago.
Yeah.
It just spits you right out. So this, according to Giant Freaking Robot, who made the video that I watched, was very fun. So this is sort of suggesting that in this world, space-time continuum is spherical. Ask me what that means. I don't know.
Okay. I was like,
So,
what?
but what they do point out is that nothing is technically ever in the exact same place at the exact same time
Because
because
of
we're on
that
a spinning
rotation.
Earth.
Yeah.
And so, you know, exactly, at, November, whatever it was, 1955, him going through that spot, where technically would he physically have landed? We don't know. I'm sure you could math it out, but, like it's them spitting out exactly at that spot. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, it may not be logically sound, but again, who cares? It works.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, again, with like the dates. So I did lie. I do want to CinemaSins just for a quick second. So Doc says, okay, you can go wherever you want. So let's go see the signing of the Declaration of Independence. July 4th, 1776. Guess what? You're going to be in Southern California. There's no roads. You wouldn't get there in time
Right.
to Philadelphia.
You got to
And
go like
then,
3 weeks before.
yeah. And then he has the audacity to put in the birth of Christ at 0000 year. Love that. Again, Southern California. How are you getting to the other side of the world?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my little CinemaSins moment.
So would you
Um,
not be able to go before the birth of like to BC because that would mess with the
Oh, there's no
that's a good
negatives.
question. Yeah.
wow.
So you know, like, can you only go to, you know, 000, there's no AD or BC, I guess. Yeah, so you can only go so far in time. Which again, if
Mhm.
you need gas, that's probably for the best if you don't want to get
True, true,
stranded.
true.
But I
Yeah.
mean, I know in the sequels they go further back when there isn't traditional gasoline or traditional gasoline, petrol as we have it. So yeah. And then this is where I'm going to start breaking our brains. So
It's broken. My brain be
Yeah.
broke.
he knocks down that second pine, right?
Yes.
Leaving just the one lone pine. Is this the first instance of him changing the past? Or like, does this create an alternate universe because of knocking down this pine? Or is he just following through on the events that are supposed to happen because he was actually shot into an alternate universe? He's not in his same timeline anymore.
Mm.
So I
Then it
don't
doesn't
know.
matter. Whatever he does doesn't matter because he's going to return to the universe he was in before.
But he
Does
doesn't.
he?
He stays.
He doesn't return
But
to his old universe.
but Doc tells him that he can't affect things because it will.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where he starts to disappear on the photo.
Yeah.
Yes.
But the idea is that he is in the same.
Or I have this later
Yeah.
in the research, but is he just taking the place of the other Marty that he's watching at the end of the movie? So now this is his new universe.
But now he has to kill off himself. That's
No,
what
because his old, that one goes into the past. It's a loop,
oh,
but they're going
so
into
now we're.
ultimate different universes. So
But
maybe
the one that goes into the past only goes into the past momentarily. He'll return eventually, and then we'll have a point at which there'll be two of them.
this is the point where we have two of them, because when he goes into the past, he goes to 1955. He doesn't have a way to get back. Like the one that he's watching, the Marty he's watching. So
Yeah.
he gets shot into the next universe next door. So is this Marty was meant to go to the next universe. He was never meant to stay in his original timeline. No Martys ever, if we're talking about multiple. Yeah, there you go. Brain breaking. I
No.
love time travel stuff.
Because I was like, this is so simple. Like this time travel, so simple, so clean.
Yes, it is. It is and it isn't. Again, they don't want you to think too much,
Right,
but I
they
love
don't.
thinking so much of this. But yeah, so let's get back to the plot.
So, all right, let me just get my personality back together. All right, so he goes to the town. It's the 50s. It's Norman Rockwell. He's sees it's
It's
like read it.
white.
Yeah,
Let's just.
very white. There's
It's a little creepy.
Yeah,
there's a movie like Ronald Reagan movie playing in the
Oh,
theater.
right, right, right.
yeah,
He goes into the malt shop and the guy's like sees his vest and is like, "Oh, you jump ship,"
Yeah.
which is something my family would say all the time whenever someone wore a vest. And this is an iconic look because I think I've been to a Halloween party where there are multiple Martys in that costume. That or the same Marty hit on both me and my friend, and we like talked about it years later. Like, oh, the
That's
Halloween party. Oh, Marty hit on me. It's like, wait, Marty hit on you too.
Oh, maybe it was the two.
I was gonna say maybe it's multiple Marty universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Uh yeah, wow. So he sees his dad, or he's sitting look at this one, he's like orders a tab
Oh,
and he's
it's
like,
so
well, I
clever.
can't get you a tab until
Yeah.
he's ordering a drink, and he's sitting next to his younger version of his dad, George. And what I love is they're both sitting the same way with their like hand behind their head.
Yeah.
And there's lots of pictures of like me and my dad where we're like both doing the same thing. Like we're both like squinting the same way. Um, so I love that little detail. But so Biff walks in and basically does the same exchange that he does with George that he does in for my brain, I'm saying Marty's past, like Marty's current
Yes.
life, where he's like, "Hello, is anyone home? Like, you have to do my homework, so I have time to write it down in my writing. Like, you don't want me to get kicked out of school, do ya?" And he hesitates. He's like, "Do ya?" And it's the same. Well, you don't want me to get fired, do ya? So It's basically the same exchange, and he's like, I don't want to see you here until my homework's done. And the malt shop owner and Goldie, who works there, who'll be running for mayor in the future, are like, why do you let him treat you that way? You gotta stand up for yourself. Uh, he's like, I could do anything I wanted to. And Jordan and Marty's like, yeah, you could be the mayor. He's like, oh, mayor.
Oh, my
And
very racist boss.
yeah, the
Yeah,
racist is
As a
like, there will never
colored
be a
mayor, that'll
colored
be the day.
mayor. Yeah.
yeah. And
Uh,
in Marty's current timeline, where he was supposed to be before, Goldie is not, he's actually re-election in a
he's a, yeah,
re-election
and
cycle because he
yeah.
has
Yeah, right.
been the mayor for a while. So yeah, he's, he did it. He made it happen.
And there's also a bit where he's trying to use the payphone.
Called
Call
Doc.
call Doc, yeah. And
Find
he's
Yeah.
not
find
ans
him.
yeah. And
And
he
then
So he
pulls
tears
it.
a page out, which
Yeah.
the owner doesn't have any problem with him tearing
That's
the
what I
page
thought
out.
too. I
Yeah,
actually thought
Yeah.
that's what he was gonna, he got to the counter. I thought he's
yeah,
gonna be like, you're gonna pay for that page you just ripped out? Like
yeah.
that's what
Because
I
back then, I
thought.
mean, the phone book was all you had.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he
Was our
ripped out
Google. That was our
what, like a
Google.
hundred households he
Yeah,
just took
Yeah.
away from
yeah,
people.
right,
And
right.
like, what is that? In the B section? So yeah, that's a lot of people, you know?
Yeah.
That's a lot of like very, very common names in
Someone
there.
just come into the shop. Sorry.
Yeah,
Can I get you a malt?
yeah. They asked for a tab, but I don't know what that is.
I'll do you order something.
I mean, I
But
remember we used to have phone books. And then I
yeah,
remember the point where my mom was like, we gotta throw these away. We don't use them.
Yeah. What
yep.
a huge waste of paper.
Because they would also send them. It's also, if you think about it now in today's like security issues thing, it's like, why did we have everyone's phone number available to
An
everyone? And
address.
address. That's psychotic.
Yeah.
Like, why would you ever do that? So
It's
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 like,
not that hard to find
Stalker's dream.
that though.
yes.
You just had to have membership to certain websites and you could just type
Yep.
in
And you can
names
find
and
anybody.
get all their like addresses, past addresses, phone numbers, family members.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's all there. So whenever someone's like, I don't want the government to have my information, I'm like,
It's like,
man,
They
ship
yeah,
have
has
it.
sailed.
people other than the government have your information.
Yeah.
So let's talk about peeping Toms.
Yeah,
Or
Oh,
so
should I say peeping Georges?
he follows his dad and he's like, where's he going? And he bikes to, Lorraine's house. I always want to
after
call
a
her
malt, you got to go
Mary.
peeps a little bit.
Yeah.
Have a malt, then go peep.
Yeah.
Classic. Oh, I miss that America.
Yeah,
Just have
right.
them all
Make
and go
America
pee.
great again. Sorry.
Yeah. Canceled though. Yeah, he I always want to call her Mary because of George. I think it's like It's a Wonderful Life. George and Mary is just
Oh, yeah.
like
Similar
ingrained.
movie.
Yeah. And he's watching her and then he's like, oh my gosh, my dad's beeping Tom. And he falls off the tree and he sees, oh, my dad's gonna get hit by a car, pushes him, and then gets hit by the car.
Yep.
Uh,
And
so
this completely alters his parents' meeting
yeah,
that we know of from earlier in the movie, how Lorraine sort of very sadly told it didn't seem like a happy marriage there.
No.
So to kind of go back to one of those principles, the compossibility principle, what did
okay.
happen in the past cannot change. So what a time traveler can experience is limited to what has already unfolded
Mhm.
in the past. But he actually gets to change the past. So this is where it's like, there's alternate universes, or is he actually changing the past? I don't
Well, I
know.
mean, Doc is arguing that he did, or that
Yeah.
if he doesn't,
Yeah.
he will, and then he explains that he did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the way my brain sees it is like one linear timeline, like no alternate
Yeah.
universes. So like by changing the past, then the future is altered.
Yeah.
Right. But he
Yeah, I mean,
did
I think that
experience Twin Pines Mall. So it happened. So when he goes forward, I know, love it.
no, but here's the thing: is I mean, anything could have happened after he hit that tree. Is there a possibility that Mr. was it Parker, whoever the guy was, that the farmer went out
Mm.
and got himself
Another
a
tree.
replacement
Yeah.
because he was determined to do this thing, which was have a pine tree farm.
But he didn't in the universe because it's still the Lone Pine Mall when he gets back, or it becomes the
Oh,
Lone Pine
right.
Mall when he comes back. So
That's
it's
right. Oh.
I don't know. Rules of time travel are
This is when I
fun.
miss doing fairy tales in our discussion is like, what insane moral did a courtier of Louis the 16th attack
This
onto
is
this story? And now I'm like, oh,
let's talk about Oedipus complex. Let's get back to
okay.
it.
So this scene only got crazier to me as an adult. So like, cause like they pull him into the house and they put him in the daughter's bedroom. And they leave her there and she takes his pants off.
None of this is
Well,
on in
no, that's not necessarily true. We don't. That doesn't necessarily
yes, we
happen.
don't
That
see
she,
this.
yeah,
We
she may
just
have
see
put.
him
Yeah,
waking up. He's like, oh, it was a dream.
Because he hears his mom's voice.
which is
Yes.
awesome in and of itself, but not for the reasons that we find out later on that she's hitting him.
Yes. It just turns out that he does have his pants off. It could be assumed that she took them off. Does
She
she say she took
says,
them off?
yeah.
No, she says
Okay.
she put them over there.
Yeah, she doesn't necessarily say she
Oh,
took them off.
Doesn't mean she took them off his body.
okay.
Um,
Because I was like,
yeah.
that's it's not like he was bleeding from his legs. Like,
I know. Why do you
why?
have to take his pants off?
There's literally no reason to do that.
Because we need to see his Calvin Klein underwear. That's why.
Yes.
Yes, she
Yeah.
needs to assume that his name is Calvin
Calvin
Klein because
Klein.
he wrote his own name on his underwear.
Yeah, I do love that. I mean, I debated. I did not wear any Calvin Klein for this. I only own one pair of purple underwear. It is the rarest color, I feel like, in my history of men's
Mhm.
underwear, but I did wear purple underwear for this. So
Is it
uh
like a light purple or a dark purple?
it's dark, unfortunately, so it's not
Okay.
canon, but subscribe to the Patreon, you know.
Subscribe to the
I am
OnlyFans.
not wearing purple underwear. So, sorry.
Wow. So
I
let me
actually
just
Not
kick
that
you off the
committed.
Zoom call.
Yeah,
Yeah.
kick me out.
Oh my god, I'm wearing purple
Oh
underwear.
my gosh.
I'm the
Wow.
only
Look
one
at
in the
that.
Zoom without purple underwear.
That's embarrassing for you. Yeah, because she's like, oh, I just assumed your name was Calvin because it was written on your underwear. And she's like, yeah, like she's just very into him. It's what they later call the Florence Nightingale complex, where you fall in love with your patient. Um,
Yes.
Florence Nightingale didn't do that though, right? Are they
Not
just
with her
using that because
son.
Florence Nightingale's a nurse?
Yeah,
I think
not with her
that
son.
Yeah, definitely not with
no.
her son. Yeah.
Yeah, it's different.
It's like a
Yeah.
caretaker that falls in love with you.
Yeah, because isn't she like the founder of modern nursing? Isn't that where I know her name? It's
I
not
think
Women's History
so.
Month anymore, so I don't remember.
So you don't need to know women.
Yeah, I can't name a woman.
That time's up.
Yeah. But so he ends up having dinner with his family, but her family, and he sees Joey in the like in the playpen. Like he just loves
Yeah.
his playpen. He loves being behind, and they're like, oh, get used to those bars. And she is just over the moon for him. Like, he should stay with us. He can stay in my
Yeah,
room.
right.
It's like,
And the parents are not picking up on how horny their daughter is. And I mean, well, also they have a TV. This is their first ever TV set, right? They're
yeah,
watching, I don't remember what the show was supposed to be, but he was like, oh, I've
The
seen this
honeymooners.
before. The
yeah.
Honeymooners.
Yeah,
He was like,
yeah.
oh, yeah, I've seen
The
this
rerun.
one from the reruns.
Yeah.
Like,
His
what's
uncle, who was a child, is like, what's a rerun?
Yeah.
this is brand
This is where
new.
all the dramatic irony just
Yeah.
starts pouring in because we know
Yeah.
everything about his situation. He's time traveled, and this one of my favorite lines in that whole situation is when he takes off because
Yeah.
mother is hitting on him, and he goes, she's like, he's a strange boy, and he goes, he's an idiot. He's like, Lorraine, if you ever had a kid like that, I'll disown
I'll
you.
disown you.
Yeah.
Like,
I
just
And like,
also
I blame his parents.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love the line where his mom, well, his grandma is like, do I know your mom? And he's like, I think you do. She goes, well,
Yeah.
let me call her. No one's home. And it's just, oh, it's so good.
Yeah, because it's also like it's a pet of like the 50s where everyone's like so trusting,
Yeah.
like, oh, we can have this stranger in our house.
Right.
And like, or with our kids in the bedroom of our teenage daughter.
Right.
And because he says, oh, we have two TVs. They're like, oh, nobody has two TVs.
What are you, rich?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which because I mean I remember my parents saying that, you know, we used to not like it was one TV and they showed Wizard of Oz once a year,
Yeah.
you know.
And a landline on the wall.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I mean they took a video at work once of me explaining to my colleague dial-up internet
Yeah.
and like her
Oh,
like blank stares. I was doing like beep beep. I was like used to like
Yeah.
scream at you.
Oh my God.
that's
When
fun.
one year I was lecturing one of those larger lectures and I turned on my computer and I still had like AOL and it was way too, AOL was long gone and that sound came up when you dial up AOL and I was just like, I'm such a loser. Like it's like the beginning of the semester and it's like I've given them all the impression that I'm a complete loser, which I am.
Yeah. No, you gave
Very
them
funny.
some great character development
Yeah,
that
yeah,
they will
right.
remember forever.
Great story. Yeah.
Yeah, whenever I see
I was like,
a
actually,
motor
that was our class.
whenever I see a motorcyclist in LA weaving through the lanes, I
Oh
think of
yeah.
you talking about that and
Oh,
Hannah
that was the character
screaming.
development of me. I
Yeah,
remember.
character
Yep.
And it
development.
was like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Yep. It's all coming together, all the
Yeah.
pieces.
Uh, so he finds Doc and he's talking, he's like, I'm from the future. Remember that we're back in this time because today you hit your head, you had a vision of the flux capacitor, time travel. He's like, oh, I don't believe you. You know, who's the president? Ronald Reagan, the
Well,
actor.
also, this is literally the night that happened. Like
Yeah.
he probably had just woken up from his vision,
Yeah.
like after he hit his head and came to the door, and then this happened. Like, how wild is that?
And then to learn that the president is an actor.
Yeah. Who's the vice
Yeah.
president? Jerry Lewis?
Yeah. Uh, and so
Yeah.
Hannah, you have a note about the
The compossibility principle
my brain already
meets
just that
alternative
title.
universes. So I have some questions. Did Marty's coming to him with like, hey, you invented the flux capacitor. It exists. Did that fuel Doc's obsessive quest? Or is that he would have just done it regardless of Marty?
Doc's too much of a professional to let it affect
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
But in this universe, maybe
Yeah.
it's because of Marty.
Or maybe it just gave him a little extra nudge. It
Yeah. It was like,
worked.
well, it also gave him that end goal that like, I know I can do it.
Yeah.
Like
But
it
it's also
exists. I do it in the
sometimes
future.
when it's like a foregone conclusion, you're like, well, why should I bother trying? I mean, if it's going to happen anyway.
Yeah, he could procrastinate it, which
Yeah.
honestly, that's probably what I would have
But
done. I'd be like, oh, well, I'll get to
I
it in
would
30
argue that
years.
Doc's a professional and he wouldn't let, he knows what he's into with time travel and he knows he can't.
Well, he also ends up completely spending his family fortune to make this happen or
Yeah.
to make a variety of things happen because he's a disgraced nuclear physicist. So he basically squanders his fortune in this pursuit.
Yeah.
And in this universe, I would argue that perhaps it's because of Marty. So Marty ruined his life
I mean, I was gonna
and got
say,
him killed at the end, potentially.
Well, maybe that's Marty's taking pity on him and that's why he's his friend in the future.
Maybe.
That explains the friendship.
it's like you can't escape fate. You can't escape the oracle's
Mm.
decree, or as Jean Baptiste de Bazelet said
Oh,
in
God.
Cinderella Cat,
Not this guy.
he is mad who opposes the stars.
Yeah.
Okay, so Doc tells Marty like you can't talk to anyone in the past. It could have devastating consequences. The butterfly effect, like you don't know, like who have you met? And he's like, my parents, and I
My
changed how they
entire
met.
family.
Yeah. I might have had an attraction. My mother might have an attraction to me.
Does he mention that to Doc? Because
He doesn't have to talk about it because she comes almost immediately after that, right?
Yeah,
She
there's
sneaks.
in the next scene where he's
Oh, it's
with
an
Yeah.
Doc. Yeah.
yeah, and Doc's like giving it like so that's when it's clear to Doc
yeah,
what's gone down.
because this is also where he shows Marty shows Doc the photo of him and his siblings. And his older brother is starting to disappear from the photo.
And he thinks it's like a
So
trick.
that's
Yeah.
yeah. And also he's so when he first gets there, he's like testing something on him.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
like
He
a
like
mind
sticks something on
reader.
his
Yeah,
yeah, some
which is
mind
great.
reading.
But he's more pissed off that it doesn't work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than the fact that he's from the future.
Oh,
Great.
that's great.
There's
Great.
I mean, I don't know if you're already going to go here, but one of the biggest contrivances in the story is that the time that Marty goes back obviously is the date that the flux capacitor was invented, but it's also just a week away from the date, the time that the bolt of lightning hits the clock. That's
Yeah.
pretty convenient that that's just a week apart.
Yeah, it's also convenient that it's like right before the dance, because if
Right.
he messed all this up and then had to leave before the dance, oh
Yeah. So
boy.
that's like
That,
three things that happened within
yeah.
inside of a week that were like the biggest, in terms of
Yeah.
affecting time.
It doesn't feel
Yeah.
contrived though. At least to
I
me,
know, I
I'm
know. I
like,
mean,
yeah,
but when you dissect it as a screenwriter, you're like, I
yeah,
can't do that. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you
yeah,
get called out in the workshop for that for
yeah.
sure.
you do. I think it's sometimes good to remember though that like when you get caught, like that kind of like focus on all those details. It's if I'm in the moment and I'm feeling with those characters and I'm on the journey, like those things don't pull me out. They pull
Yep.
you out when you're like, oh, I don't care what's happening. You know,
Right.
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah,
just
you have
like
to
that.
write an Oedipus story around those three contrivances
So that we
in
won't
order for
even
people.
notice.
Exactly. We'll be like, what the hell
We're
are you
so focused on
doing?
that. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, to be fair, when I think of like my main memories of the movie were all related to the family stuff. A lot of the flux
Yeah.
capacitor stuff was kind of like, oh yeah, I mainly just remembered like,
Well, I mean, that's the bulk of this movie too,
yeah,
Yeah,
right?
right.
It's just like I have to basically I have to undo the grandfather paradox that I've just set forth, even though he obviously doesn't use that terminology.
yeah,
Um, because he literally does prevent his parents' natural meeting and then also ignites a crush from his mother, which definitely creates a crazy paradox for him to have to solve, which is basically just like the crux of the rest of the film. Getting home is sort of tertiary. It's like I have to make sure that I still exist to get
Right.
home.
yeah.
But why is there, does anyone ever talk about the fact that when Marty grows up to be a teenager in 1985, that his father isn't a little concerned that he looks exactly like the guy that his mother was with in
Uh-huh.
1955? Like
That's
that he's
what,
still not seeing this guy on the side?
and then they named him Marty, and it's like, huh. It's like they have amnesia of that.
Yeah.
It's
But I
so
mean,
weird.
why doesn't he think that his wife has a relationship and that Marty's not even his son because he looks exactly like that kid?
I mean,
He spent a whole week with them. I mean, it's not like he would
And this
forget what he looks like.
and this guy like changed George's life. Like
Yeah.
gave him confidence.
Yeah.
And it
yeah.
is weird, not only that they don't remember him, but they're not like, we named our child Marty. He looks like that guy. I mean, maybe they're so rich they got amnesia. I don't know.
Yeah. Or
True.
Back to the Future 4, we'll tackle this.
Oh gosh.
They won't stop making Indiana Jones, so
Yeah, I caught my boyfriend watching that last night and I was like, first of all, how dare you
Pause
watch it
him.
without
Like
me?
it's like
He paused it as soon as I walked in the room. I was like, what are you watching? Nothing. He's backspacing out of
I,
Disney Plus.
I think there would be worse things you could catch him watching, like
I
pause.
know, right? That's what makes it even funnier is like he was
Yeah.
watching, what is that, Indiana Jones 5, right?
yeah.
He's like, it's actually not too bad so far. I was like, you're like 8 minutes into it.
When that movie came out and people talk about it flopping, I was like, oh, I didn't even know it came out. That's out. That was
I
made.
know.
Yeah. So now he has to go to school. I love they do this in teen movies all the time where you can just like go to a high school, like
Yeah,
you're a
right. Walk
teenager,
in.
right? Just
Yeah.
walk in, you're there,
But you know what? It's the 50s. I believe it.
Oh yeah, there
You know?
were kind of metal detectors or
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no parent sign in. There's no actual student
Because
enrollment,
Doc's just walking around there too.
Yeah, right. Like an old man and a non-student walking around high school.
I mean, we used to in Glee Boot, we would freak out about that all
Oh
the
yeah.
time
all
because
the
we're like,
time.
how many people are
But then
just walking
again,
through this school?
that was in the 21st century. That was in the 2010s. And I'm like, that would not fly. Here it's
No,
like, oh, it's 1955.
there were no
Like, there
laws.
are no
Yeah,
student records. Like, these kids
Yeah.
just go in and out of different schools as
We
they
don't even know
please.
if you're a student. Yeah, because he just started attending. He wasn't attending classes, but he was
Just
like,
walking the halls.
but the Strickland thought he was a student, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so did Biff. Like you're new here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he discovers, he talks to his dad, he discovers he likes like sci-fi and likes to write about alien invasions and stuff. And he's learning new things about his dad. He sees that his dad has a crush on Lorraine, who's being harassed by Biff, pretty aggressively. And he's like, you need to ask her out. And he's like, I don't think I can handle that kind of rejection, which is exactly what he said about the music. So even though like
Yeah.
he's the cool kid and his dad's like the dork, it's like, oh, and she do have
Well,
a
also
lot in common.
he won't let Marty read his stories because he
Yeah.
also like doesn't want to be rejected. He's like, oh, I don't show people my stuff, which I'm like, you know what? I feel that. I oftentimes don't want people to see my stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
That's
So
what-
he's like, okay, how's this gonna work? And he's like, oh, let me hey Lorraine, this is George. And he doesn't
Yeah.
even register. She's like, oh, Marty or Calvin.
Calvin.
Calvin, he's like, he's a dream,
Guy who was peeking in your window yesterday.
Oh God, yeah.
uh so he is like, okay, I gotta think. And so he puts on the hazmat suit that he was wearing when he drove in, and he hooks up Van Halen music to his
Like a
ear,
Walkman, right?
like
Yeah,
Walkman, yeah,
yeah,
to George's ears, and starts playing the music, and it's like, I'm Darth Vader from the planet Vulcan. Like, you need to ask Lorraine out or I'll melt your brain.
So before I get into my talking about alternate universes again, just like, okay, let's say that this works. George successfully asked Lorraine out. Imagine that being the story that they tell. Like, yeah, your dad asked me out because he was threatened by an alien in a dream. That if he didn't ask me out, that he would have his brain melted. And it's
Well, he's
like
not
you
gonna
were
tell.
coerced.
he doesn't have to tell him that.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
didn't tell that he was peeping on her when they
that's
met.
true. But there was still like the car getting him getting hit by the car,
Yeah.
which did happen.
But there were other witnesses.
That's true.
And they
As
had the
Taylor Swift
bag at the
says,
end.
no body, no
Yeah,
crime. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the body was there, but it was still alive. So it
Yeah.
was still a crime, though.
Not to his he's probably not going to want to tell that story that he was threatened and that's why he
By an
asked her out.
alien.
Uh,
Yeah.
He was in love.
yeah.
And he might not
Well,
even remember. I don't
well,
know.
he does remember because that's the premise of his book.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he doesn't remember Marty.
Right? Like I mean,
Sorry
maybe
for going back
maybe
to
the
that.
Darth Vader thing was so traumatic to him that he just like completely blocked out Marty. He's like, "Oh, yeah, there was that weird guy that hung out with us for a week
Well,
and then he disappeared."
it's like those, I say memes, but there's memes about the real thing that it's like, ask your dad to name like three of your friends that you've known your whole life. They'll maybe get one. Like, maybe he just kind of was like, oh, there's that kid. He just looked like whatever.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I do believe it because I'm now in the stage where I'm forgetting the names of people I went to school with, even though I spent kindergarten through 12th grade with many of them. I'm starting to forget their names and faces. And that's only been,
Yeah.
what year is it? It's been 12 years.
We're giving another eight.
So, yeah. So I guess maybe I believe that he would forget, especially if he only had him for a week, even though he was kind of pivotal.
Okay, fair enough.
Maybe there's some
Maybe.
logic to it. But I love the mixing of the different sci-fi franchises. Clearly, Marty is not a sci-fi fan.
Yeah.
Because as a sci-fi fan, I don't think you would want to mix those. You're like, they're too pure, they have to be separate.
I mean, he's a cool kid.
Exactly, he skateboards.
Yeah.
So he is bringing in references to his universe, right? Which we'll come back to later in the movie when he brings another reference into this universe and takes credit for it, kind
Yes.
Yeah.
of.
So he's giving George like the words to like ask her out, like say like you're meant to be, you're her destiny,
Yes.
like all this stuff. And then George comes in and he's so nervous and he's messing everything up that he wrote down. He's like, you are my density. And I think of that all the time. Whenever
You
someone
weigh
says
me
destiny,
down.
I think you
Yeah,
are my density. But Biff is like, didn't I tell you not to come in here until you finish my homework? Like, you owe me money. And he's immediately like, oh, yeah, like doing his kind of like nerd thing.
It's a
And
good impression.
thank you,
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah. I'll do that at an open mic. But then so Marty trips Biff, and then Biff is like, I'm gonna beat your ass or whatever. And Marty is like outwitting him and just making himself so cool. You know, he like makes his own skateboard and is skateboarding around on cars and like doing tricks. And then he causes Biff to get and his friends to have manure dumped all over them.
Which that is not coming out ever.
Oh,
Cost
that card, yeah.
$400 to my car. That's what he said.
Yeah, $300, and then I was like, "That's it." And then I was like, "Oh yeah, it was the 50s."
Yeah, the car itself was $300.
Yeah, probably.
It's a new car.
And so Hannah has a note. If does Marty create the skateboard?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Maybe.
right. I mean, he does. He invents the skateboard.
yeah, right
There's
then and there.
there's another scene where somebody is, I think it was an invention of the time that didn't really take off. And it's a kid bouncing around on spring sneakers.
Yes, I
Yeah.
saw that.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I think that, yeah, Marty invented the skateboard right there in front of our eyes.
Yep.
And so Lorraine is like, they're like, where does he live? And Lorraine's like, I don't know, but I'm gonna find him. Which is a great thing because she's like, oh, I don't like that, Jennifer. You know, girls shouldn't be calling boys, you
Right.
They
know.
shouldn't be
when
chasing boys. I didn't do that.
Yep.
Yeah, right, Mom.
Or that dramatic irony.
Yep.
And so she finds his house or finds Doc's house, and she's like, hey, you know, and she's like, I just thought it'd be, you know, no one's asked me the enchantment under the sea dance. Like maybe you could take me. And he's like, George didn't ask you. And he's like, George is cute, but don't you think a man should be able to like defend his woman? And
Yeah,
he's like,
toxic masculinity to get
Yeah.
the job.
Exactly.
so we don't see him say yes, but he does.
Yeah.
And so he tells George, he's like, well, this is what we're gonna do. He's like, nice girls don't like to be taken advantage of.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna assault your future wife and
My mother. Yeah. He doesn't like say it. He's like, okay, this is what, I'm gonna come in, be the hero. So wait, what are you gonna do? And he goes, I'm gonna make her upset. How are you gonna make her upset? Nice girls get angry when they get taken advantage of. And I'm like, ah!
Yeah.
This is
Oh.
This just shows you how insensitive we were in 1985 because nobody had a problem with it when it came out. Everyone was like, yeah, fight back, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of reading Catcher in the Rye, and he's talking about his roommate and how he doesn't like his roommate because he'll be making out with a girl and he won't listen when the girl says no.
Yeah.
And you're like, and it is still seen as like, oh, not good. Like it's not good, positive behavior, but it's also just like, oh, it's a sucky thing people do. Like
Yeah.
being rude to waiters, you know,
It's
not
a
like
symptom of being a woman in this
Right.
time and in a lot of times after as well. So
there was a memo that went out about, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, where there was a certain amount of companies that were basically saying, if you use rape or sexual assault in your movie as a device, and your movie's not about that, so it's not really tackling the trauma or, really being realistic about that, but using it as a device, we will flat out not read your script. So,
Wow.
and it was a big turn because you look at movies, I mean, you go back to the past and see movies. I mean, movies in the 80s, yes, there were some great movies, and I love Back to the Future, but there were some incredibly insensitive movies.
yeah.
I mean, there was a
Revenge
movie
of the
called
Nerds.
Soul Man, and I think it was shot in the 80s, and it was about a guy who colored his skin black, so black face, black body. He like used shoe polish or something, colored his entire body, and then got into Harvard and attended Harvard. Yeah,
Oh, he
and every
Rachel
movie
Wow.
about it was called
Dolezal.
Soul Man. It was shot on Wheaton College's campus, but it was supposed to be Harvard, and it was a huge Hollywood hit. and every studio, like three studios, all backed it. Now I bet you
Yeah.
couldn't even find the movie.
Interesting.
Yeah, are you
Well,
looking for it?
Trading Places.
Yeah, right.
What's his name? Goes blackface toward
Eddie
the end of
Murphy.
the movie, and it's
Oh yeah.
oh
Dan
my God.
Aykroyd.
And
Yeah.
yeah, Aykroyd.
Yeah.
He does blackface like Jamaican or some sort of like
Yeah,
Caribbean,
right.
and that's like the plot device.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we watched that movie over Christmas, it was like, it's a Christmas movie, it's funny, and I forgot that happened. And my boyfriend's like, "Really, you like this movie?" And I was like, "I forgot about this part."
Well, I mean, every movie I watch, like from that time, there's so many things. I mean, Rocky keeps Adrian in
Yeah.
his apartment against her will.
Yes.
And it's like putting his huge arm up against the door, like, come on, stay.
Yeah.
There's
But
parts
she's like,
in
I really want to
Breakfast
leave.
Club,
Yep.
What?
the
Breakfast
Breakfast
Oh, yeah.
Club.
Club. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm telling you, all those movies did very well, and everybody loved them, and nobody even better than I at any of
Big
that.
shift in culture over that
Well, I mean,
time.
just like getting a sense of how to be sensitive in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember as an intern reading a lot of scripts that would throw that in there. And I was very fortunate, like that some of the companies I was interning at where I could be like, this was really horrible and I don't think that's good. And they would back me on that. I'd be like, yes, that's a good call.
Yeah.
But it's people still like go to that. And there are lots of
Mm-hmm.
shows, like big shows that will do that still. And so it's like, yeah, it's like the casualness which it's handled, even though it's still not considered a positive thing, which compared to other 80s movies that like really hand waved it, at least it's like a negative
Oh
action,
yeah,
but like
yeah,
Yeah.
it's still like not treated with the same
And
level of
yeah.
negativity.
Was it like 16 Candles where he asked her for her underwear and
I
did
think
say he had sex with her and she
so.
gives it to him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like that's like, oh my God,
Yeah. It's
why were we all okay with that?
yeah. It's wild. And I mean, like, we'll talk about it in like this. Are we at the dance, right? The sequence. Basically like the
Yeah.
aftermath.
Yeah.
But let's talk about it.
Yeah, we're right there where they're at the dance where I'm like, why couldn't the scheme have been like, I'll do something really embarrassing to myself. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna rip my
Yeah.
pants and you're
There's a
gonna,
lot. There's probably like 1,000 different things he could have done.
yeah.
Yeah. It's yeah,
I
it's
know, I think, I'm
questionable.
sure they worked backward from the idea of Biff is getting involved and like how we're gonna do,
Mm,
not like, okay, Marty's first idea will be I'm gonna pretend to attack my own mother. Like I'm sure they worked back from the Biff thing, but still it's like that's an insane idea to go
yeah.
with. So
Yeah.
they park and he's super nervous, obviously. And she's like, I'm almost 18. This isn't the first time I've done this.
Yeah, she's drinking, she's smoking, and he's like,
Yeah.
"What are you doing?" Because the mom he knows doesn't
Yeah.
do these kinds of, or she
Well,
Well,
said
she
she didn't
does
do those.
drink.
yeah, she
She said
does
she
do. I mean,
didn't do
that's
these kinds of things.
yeah, but she's
Yeah.
an alcoholic in the future, and yeah,
Yeah.
So he's like, you might regret it later. And she's like, you sound like my mother. And he's like,
yeah, which is such a great line. That's like the classic dramatic irony in that film is
Yeah.
And she eventually leans over to kiss him. And he's all like, and I'm like, maybe you should get the hint that he is like, it almost looks like Miss Piggy and Kermit, where he's like
yeah.
all like scrunched up. And she's like, oh, that didn't feel right. Like that felt
It
like
felt
kissing
like
my
kissing my
My
brother.
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 Yeah.
But then so the door opens and you think, oh, it's gonna be George because we see George at the dance, like, oh, I gotta go, it's my time. But it's Biff and his goons, and they drag Marty away, and shove him in the trunk of the band's car.
This band of grown men and these teen goons are like using racial slurs and shit. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God, yeah.
Oh yeah,
okay, these are adult men. There's 5 or 6 of them. And I
Yeah.
was like, there are 3 of these children. I was
Well,
like, the past race dynamics, wild. The fact that they
yeah.
had the confidence to do that is
Well,
crazy.
stupidity.
stupid.
Yeah.
There's also, I mean,
Stupid,
critiques that
immoral.
wouldn't have been allowed in 1955.
What
depending on
what
what the having a like a
oh,
black
Black
all
band
black band,
band.
yeah,
Yeah.
in
perform at the
19.
school.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, so they handle the goons, but meanwhile, George comes out to see Biff assaulting Lorraine. Like
Yes.
she's punching, screaming, no,
Yeah.
stop. And
Being
he's
raped.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's being
Yes.
raped. Like it's like a black and white, like there's no
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's and so he's like, and he's like, I think you have the wrong car. And he's like, he sits still for far too long, but then eventually he's like, no, let her go. Get your hands off of her. He starts fighting. Biff starts beating George, and Lorraine is like, stop. And then when he pushes Lorraine, that
That's
gives yeah, George is like, no, and then like knocks him out cold, one punch wonder.
yeah.
Um, and so she's like, oh, you saved me, and everyone runs out and they're so impressed by him.
George McFly.
And he's like, let's go to the, they're like, let's go to the dance. And I'm like, I feel like Lorraine would want to be like, take me
Yeah.
home.
Yeah.
The
Right.
aftermath of this,
I feel romantic now.
yeah, is not accurate.
No, of course not.
Like she would she would literally be like, I need to go home. But no, it's everything's chill, you know. It's that's one of those things that like logically is not sound, but I guess in the context of like what audiences deemed somewhat acceptable or they could gloss over, it makes sense that they could get away with
Yeah.
it in this movie, but I'm like, wow, that's
It's
not
Well, I
right.
mean, I think it's fair to say that all the female characters in this film are not really written with dimension. I mean,
No.
Jennifer is that example I mentioned, where she's just kind of like brushed aside and not
She
really part of the
becomes
story.
trash in one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
sequels.
So
So, yeah.
yeah, it's you can tell that there's no women involved in
the writing.
the writing,
Yeah.
creating these characters and no one who's gone through any kind of experience of feeling violated in that way. I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to assume anything, but like at least they don't have empathy for how she would feel. They're not putting themselves in that character's shoes, and they don't
Yes.
have a experience with that, or they're that's too dark. We're trying to keep it light,
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
But what we need to use the rape in the movie, but we just want to keep it light. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
like,
You're like,
if you
there
want to
Exactly.
are
keep it light,
other
maybe don't use rape in your movie. There was a
Yeah.
movie that Jodie Foster was in called The Accused. I wonder when that came out, if it was around that time. Maybe that was like early 90s, um, which was all about the trauma of someone being
Yeah.
sexually assaulted. And that's an example of it not using it as a device at all. That's actually what the movie was about. Uh,
Yeah. It was
yeah.
88. So yeah, it would have
Oh,
been
yeah.
a
So just
couple
3
years
years
after
after.
this.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
while this movie is enjoying its success, that movie came out, So it wasn't like
Yeah.
we were complete idiots.
Completely.
Like
Yeah.
there were some people that were actually sensitive to what was going on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, hey, when we in our Sleeping Beauty episode when we talked about like in that the early medieval epic where it later is like, oh, she kind of resents him, and it's just like a throwaway thing. It's like people knew. I think people kind of claim, oh, we didn't, it was a different time, we didn't know. And it's like people knew. So now it's the dance, but he's still disappearing from the picture because he's rescued from the truck and he's like, the
And
parents need to dance my parents, they need to dance, like we have to dance, and they're like, well, do you have someone who can play guitar?
And he's
And
like, I can do it. Yeah,
hell
because
yeah.
the guitarist has his hand like slashed open or something, and so
yeah
he's injured. Um, and then yeah, we cut to him on stage playing the guitar, and the band's like, all right, okay, and they make it
yeah
nice and romantic for the dance.
Earth Angel. And then so Marty or Mary, I said Marty and George, Lorraine and George are dancing, and then some guy cuts in and is like pulling her away. It's like, and then because he's like, I'm disappearing, he's like dying, and then
Yeah.
George is like, no, back off, and then they kiss, and he's like,
It
back to
takes
life.
Yeah.
it's such like a strange thing where like he's literally actively like disappearing from existence, and they're
On
drawing this
stage.
out so long where
Of
like
course. Yeah.
this guy's dragging his dance partner away, and it's just like,
And she's screaming
George,
like, George. It's like no one else in that dance is like,
They
are you okay?
they
Yeah,
slowed it
right.
down
It's
so
once again, she's been
dramatically.
now sexually assaulted 3 times, assaulted 3 times by 3 different
Yeah.
men,
But
Yeah,
George constantly has to save her, and
and she still feels like
that's
kissing.
that's the key to a happy marriage right there.
this movie I do feel like tries to have like three different climaxes.
Yeah.
And it's like I always remembered the one where George beats up Biff, and then these other things. It's like, wait, the plot's still going, you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Uh,
because we still need the stakes of like, oh, they haven't kissed yet. He's disappearing because of the grandfather paradox that he kicked off,
yeah,
whatever. But they don't give like a time frame for when he could disappear, really. Like it's
Right.
yeah.
just
No,
like as long as it
this is again.
happens, well, I guess by the end of the dance, he only has until the end of the dance.
Well,
Otherwise,
no, I mean, is that entirely true? Because
right.
what if he kissed him tomorrow? Or kissed her tomorrow?
Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of strange. Like,
I
why
mean,
is
but
he all of a sudden disappearing?
it
It's
feels right in the
I
moment.
mean, it's fine.
yeah.
It's fine. I mean, we just go with
Yeah.
the logic. It's a very simple logic.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it has to happen, sparks have to fly. So they kiss, he's back to life. He sings Johnny Be Good because they're like, oh, let's do another song. And his, you
So
know,
the guy who's leading the band is, I don't remember what his first name was, but his last name is Barry.
Marvin, right?
Marvin.
yeah.
And
Marvin
he's
Berry.
calling up Chuck
Mar-
Berry, his cousin. He's like, hey, you know that sound you were looking for? I've got it right here. And he holds up the
A
phone.
white dude thought. Sorry.
A white dude thought of this song that you're going to become famous for.
But he only
And
knows the song because Chuck.
Because
because,
yeah, right. That's where you go
so
into the loop.
yes, he brought this song either to his own past. So, like, if we're saying this is the same exact timeline that he should exist in,
Yeah.
he goes back in time and technically writes Johnny Be Good. So, technically, Chuck Berry did not come up with that song in his own timeline. And he's completely
Well,
erasing history.
maybe
It's
Or
like
he
yesterday,
has an
that Beatles
alternative,
movie.
right? Or he creates the alternative timeline when he got here that this is actually how Chuck Berry got the song. So it's
yeah.
just an alternative universe. That's why I'm choosing that theory, because I
Okay.
refuse to allow him to erase history like that. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing you could say maybe is that he inspired Chuck Berry, and Chuck Berry didn't hear the whole song on the phone because he was like, he put out the phone for a little bit,
Yeah.
and he
True,
heard a little
true.
bit, and it inspired him to write the rest of the song because he didn't hear
Rest-
the whole, because he
Yeah.
hacks it.
Yeah.
He
Yeah,
starts going
it's
into like a riff.
Yeah.
yeah.
He does a
Yeah, he
riff that
goes
the people don't love.
Metallica. And I was
Yeah.
like, these
Yeah.
people are not ready for that. And they go
They were not.
silent. They're like, what is he doing? Because he
This
also kicks
Also did
over an
Chuck
amp.
Berry's dance.
Yes, he
No,
also, and so it's like Chuck Berry couldn't have seen that. So
yeah. So the
it
dance is still
right,
none,
right, and
none
they
of it
didn't have
makes
like
sense.
video like at that time. And I mean, Robert
Right.
Zemeckis did it as well in Gump. Where he was with Elvis, and Elvis
Yes,
yeah.
showed Elvis how to dance, and the reason why Elvis has that dance is because
because
the
of
braces that he was wearing on
yes,
his legs. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like when Glee did the time thing, and then they are referencing pop culture events that wouldn't line up because they extended the school year to 2 seasons. And then
yes,
I was like, so technically in the Glee universe, Marley wrote Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball. And
yes.
yeah.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
Uh
But yeah, I mean, I think the main thing here is that they're erasing Black history from this timeline. They're like
yeah.
converting it, and it's like, ooh, that's not good. So
Again, the insensitivity of the 80s.
so wild.
Yeah, maybe I need to take back what I said about loving it. These 80s
Well, I mean,
movies.
it's not as though I still love this movie. I just, it has a lot of fault and a lot of faults that we
Yeah.
can pick away at. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he says goodbye to his parents. Lorraine is like, "Will we see you again?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think so." And he's like, if you ever have a son and he lights the rug on fire on accident when he's 8, don't go
It
too
looks
hard on
like me.
him.
Sorry.
The kid that looks exactly like me. And she's like, Marty has a nice name, it has a nice ring to it. Uh,
Yeah.
which would have been, what if he came back in the future and his name was Calvin?
Oh, that would have been funny.
That's oh, that would have been so great.
They're like, "Hell, I'm
They
Marty." It's
missed the
like,
dag.
your name's Calvin.
Yeah.
Oh my
Calvin
God.
Klein McFly.
Yeah. His middle name is Klein. Like
Oh,
really weird because now there's underwear. It's like
now there's actually Calvin Klein. Yeah. Oh my
Oh,
God.
that'd be a rough middle school
yeah, right.
experience. Yeah.
So then that changes the future because he
Now
got both.
he's a nerd. Yeah. Uh, so
Uh,
he had written Doc a letter. So now he's like trying to get back in time. He gives him a letter that tells him that he's gonna die in the future. Doc rips it up because he doesn't want to know, because the Oracle of Delphi thing. Like Oedipus, the whole story of Oedipus happens because they try to prevent the prophecy.
yes.
Yeah.
So if they hadn't abandoned Oedipus on the road, he would have grown up and known who his mother was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he rips it up, and then there's a bunch of clock tower shenanigans as they're racing to get the lightning to get him back in time.
Yeah, because they decide that 1.21
Gigawatts.
gigawatts, not gigajoules,
Gigajoules.
gigawatts is
Or
produced by
gigawatt.
a strike of lightning. And
Yeah.
so he's gonna rig up this basically just connecting wires across the street.
And which he has a
Um,
permit for.
yes.
Yeah.
Or does he actually have a permit, or is he just gonna give him like $100? Because he pulls out his
We
wallet.
never see what he.
Yeah, that's why I was like, oh, is it actually a permit? Or he's like, let me see if I can find my
We just cut away.
Benjamin.
There's so much stuff going on at that point in the story that like we're like,
Yeah,
Wild.
the clock
Bigger
tower
fish to fry.
climax, I'm like, we already got there. Like, we already have the emotional thing with his parents. So I really don't like, I'm like, okay, that's like, 'cause I was like, does Biff come back and try and stop him from going? And you're like, no.
No, in fact, it's just an act of God. They just drop a tree branch to extend
Yeah,
the
right.
scene, the sequence.
So
Yeah.
that the car will be. Yeah, I mean the car stalled also, so the
Yeah.
timing perfectly with all these things that happen.
So he makes it back to the Bowling for Soup song 1985.
Yes.
And so he's at the Lone Pine Mall.
Right.
And he sees Doc from afar. Doc gets shot, and he sees himself go and travel
Yes.
in time.
Yeah.
And that's
And
where
he,
that's the only time where there's two of him.
Yes.
yes. And so
And he doesn't see himself. I feel like there's a time travel thing where it's like you can't see yourself. I'm trying to think of
Oh.
which
yeah,
movie that is.
I guess it's less
Is that
of
true?
you can't see yourself, or it's like your selves can't interact.
Yeah, like if
That's
you see yourself, it'll cause like a paradox and like
Black
end.
hole to open up.
Yeah.
yeah, there's something with that. Like you can't talk to your past self or something. And that is like a
Yeah.
more like a literature or media rule.
Yeah.
But yeah, so when he gets shot in like the very first part of the movie, I thought, because again, I have forgotten, because I literally was like, wait, how does Doc survive? I was like, he has a bulletproof vest on at the beginning because it's a very bloodless shot, right? So I thought that like,
Oh.
oh, he was always going to prevent himself from dying and wear a vest for whatever reason, whether it was Marty in the past giving him that letter, or if it was like common sense for him kicked in. I don't know.
Mhm.
Paranoia.
Right.
So
If you steal nuclear plutonium, then you're going to be
yeah.
looking out for yourself.
True.
Yeah, so because that's what I thought. It was like, oh, it was a bulletproof vest, and I was like, wasn't that what happened before? Like in the very beginning, he was
Well, I
clearly
mean, when you
wearing
say it's
one.
bloodless, I don't know much about like if you fire a weapon at somebody, would we have
Yeah.
seen it? Because he's wearing a white suit, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like if there was nothing there and it was just his body, we probably would have seen blood, like at least pooling, because
I'm gonna go
obviously
back
they
and
don't
look.
want it to be gory, but like
Yeah.
you would at least probably see some red popping up.
Yeah.
That's what I would think. But yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
don't know.
slow-mo that and watch it.
Because I'm pretty sure he is.
No blood, yeah.
But so yeah, that was one of my other things about like the alternative universe. Like if we believe that he was not wearing a vest at the beginning, but was in this timeline, is it because he decided to? Is it because of Marty? Who's to say?
Well, because he has the letter. They piece back
But he
together.
Yes.
doesn't the first time. That's what Hannah's saying.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
in this alternative universe or
Mm.
the new version of this timeline, if that's where you want to go with it.
This is gonna be a rough month for me. Time travel month. I am
Actually, I think it's going to
struggling.
get way easier because I'm not going to be talking as much science in the next ones.
Oh, you mean because you guys are going to continue this time
It's a
travel
whole month
podcast?
of
Time
torturing
travel.
Cullen.
Because
Colin's like,
I'm
I don't know if
like
I can do this.
I'm like the mental gymnastics I'm going through. So he goes home, he sees his family, and they're wealthier and happier, nicer house. The McFlys seem to have like a good, happy marriage. His brother has a better job because he always wears a suit when he goes to the office. His sister is hot and dating around, and like all these guys are calling her. You know, his parents came back from the golf course. Um,
Yeah. Or was it tennis?
Oh,
I
maybe
think it
tennis.
was
But it's
tennis.
a better life. Just
Yeah.
yeah, it's
They have
like
hobbies.
they have
yeah.
hobbies. They look. He's like, Mom, you're so thin. Like,
Uh, which is what he says to her when he first sees her as a young girl, right? He's like, "Oh, you're thin."
Oh, right. Yes,
Yeah.
he
oh,
did say that.
that's
It's
Yeah.
a weird callback.
Right.
yeah. And
Yes, a
George,
callback, but a weird one.
yeah, I'm like, I'd block that out. George has published his first sci-fi novel. And so they're wealthy novelists, and this is where I think Hannah sent me a screenshot of this note because Biff works for them. He cleans their car, and I wrote in all caps, he should be jail. I forgot to type in,
In
but that's how I felt. I was like,
he
he should
should be
be
jail.
because I'm like, he's just around their house. Like he attacked her. Like she was screaming, punching him.
Right.
Like,
Regardless of jail,
Yeah.
she should not allow him to be anywhere near
Anywhere
her.
yeah.
And
and
neither
her
should
children and her
George.
daughter and her,
A
Yeah, that's
restraining order would be a good idea.
yeah,
yeah.
it's literally insane.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, obviously they just want to do it so they can show like, oh,
He's the
now
loser
George is on
now.
top. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Which
he's
is
like, I
But
had to keep
also,
again,
on top
right.
of him since high school. Yeah.
And
but
also
also
he's gonna see at the end of the first one, beginning of the second one, he's gonna be the one to see them leave in time travel.
yes,
And
in the
that's
Yeah.
DeLorean. Yeah. Um, yeah, that was so weird, but I was like, I get it, but also
no, well, I
wow.
mean, the bottom line is that these things wouldn't happen in films today, I don't think. I
Right.
think people are just too smart. We're just much more sensitive. We're thinking about things that I don't think people are thinking about this stuff in
Right.
general. I mean, my only excuse would be I was a stupid teenager, but but still, I mean, I think now you put this stuff in a script and everyone's going to attack it right away and be like,
Yeah.
why would you do that? Why would you put her through that and then have the guy who attacked her living like in their house ever
Yeah.
again?
Yeah.
Like,
Even
no.
washing the car is too close.
Yeah.
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 But
Uh,
oh,
Yeah.
and yeah, he does. He gets a new truck. He gets the truck that he wanted
I
at the
guess the
very
truck that
beginning of the
drove
movie.
through town.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And so this scene is the one that was kind of criticized as like the Reaganomics, kind of like, oh, if you are tough and you fight hard, like you'll be wealthy, and wealthy is
Yeah.
equals happy.
Right.
I think that is a fair extrapolation. I think this movie is just trying to be like, no, he has everything he could ever want. He's rich,
Right.
like that kind of
Yeah.
like just kind of goofy. It's a comedy.
Mhm.
But again, they put some things in the comedy that are like, wow. But yeah,
Not
so
funny.
he's gonna go to the lake with him and his girlfriend, but they're
And
never
his
gonna
mom
make.
is into it. His mom's like, "Oh,
Yeah,
she's so nice. Like, it's so romantic." And it's like, "Okay, mom.
yeah.
Thanks."
She's more progressive in this timeline. Yeah, but
Right.
With
they're
zero trauma.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they'll never make it to that lake, I guess, because the DeLorean Doc tried to travel in time to the future. Now he's back, and he's like, "Oh, we got to get to the future. We got to get to 2015." And it's like, which is now the past. Um, I say that like it's not obvious, but there he's like.
This podcast was made in 2013.
2015. And so he's like, he's like, your kids are, he's like, what happened? Are we assholes? They're like, no, your kids, they suck. I mean, I love this movie's logic that anyone you date in high school will birth your children,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I mean, so also Doc is someone who, at least previously in earlier part of the movie, was like, I don't want to know the future. I shouldn't know the future. And yet he comes to Marty and Jen is like, you're going to have kids together and something's wrong with them right now. Let's go fix it. And it's like, you are messing up the
Already,
timeline, sir.
just by
Like,
saying that. Yeah.
yeah, it's wild.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. I've always enjoyed this movie. Never thought this deeply about it. And it's like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
I know.
I mean, I still like the movie. I mean, I
Yeah.
Oh,
understand
yeah.
all the faults that it has. I mean, if you put any film under a microscope, especially one
Oh,
that
yeah.
far back, you're going to find a lot of
Yeah.
faults.
But I love
Yeah.
the eco message of the very end of the movie. Yeah, he's uses compost energy for the new flux capacitor of that.
Yeah. That wouldn't make it very far in my homeschool debate league.
Yeah, no.
Banana peels and leftover beer.
Beer, yeah.
So I guess now we'll dive into, this is where we ask, who do we root for our protagonist? Who is our protagonist?
Yeah. Who is our protagonist is actually inspired by you. And our
Me.
first, our lecture about, what is a
One-
protagonist?
Yeah.
Who is that? That's why we have that question, because, always got to clarify. Yeah.
I mean, it's really just whoever's protagonistic, the character that we sort of follow and get on their shoulders and root for them. Yeah.
Yeah. Who has the strongest desire?
Ooh.
Yeah, we use that all the time.
Yep.
I remember
It
that
works.
lecture because I
It
made a joke
works.
of like whoever's on the side of the DVD and no one laughed. And I was like, all right, I'll see myself out. I'm
Aw.
just gonna
How
just
early
go back
was
to
it in the
Michigan.
program?
It was
Oh,
pretty
that was
early.
like week 2,
Oh, so you're just like,
probably.
Yeah.
really
I was like,
kind of-
oh, no one got that. All right, I'm gonna book a flight back home.
Yeah. My sense of humor is not going to work here.
Yeah.
You are not the protagonist, Cullen.
I was not the protagonist. It's like, oh, I was supposed to be an extra right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, Marty obviously is our, the one we're following, we're rooting for. He has a strong desire to exist.
Yeah.
One character who never sexually assaulted anybody, only planned on it.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
His mother.
All right.
Yeah.
He went from 0 to 88 miles per hour very quickly.
Yeah.
In this sense too, because he's literally like, I have to do a terrible thing to my mother, not like, okay, let's think. What's something that could just make her angry in general?
I'm a pretty resourceful guy.
Yeah. Was gonna give her the ick. Or even like,
Yeah.
what if he spilled on her dress?
What if he literally was like, I mean, I don't know how this would break the space-time continuum. He's like, we can't make out because I'm actually your son from the future. And she'd be like, you're a weirdo, get away from me. And then Judge would step in,
That's it.
boom.
Yeah.
Just help,
no making out with your mom necessary.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, he could fart a lot.
There you go.
Like there's so many
Yeah.
options before assault.
Infinite options before assault.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I still definitely root that as much as that plan at the end was crazy, you definitely root for Marty.
Yeah.
Wanting to exist, wanting to get his parents back together. Do we all feel the same way, or we're gonna?
I do, but I wonder. Eric Stoltz was cast, right?
Mhm.
And shot like almost half the movie or 40 minutes or something.
Yeah.
I wonder because he's so different. He's just kind of got a different vibe. I wonder how that movie would have played out.
Well,
I'd love to see that footage and see because I'm not sure we would root for him as much.
Right.
He's kind of weird. I mean, he's a great actor, but he's kind of weird. Like that.
Yeah.
Marty's got this lighthearted. I mean, it was Michael J. Fox. He was from Family Ties. It was like, everybody loved him. So there was definitely casted. He was a much better player for that role. He was lighter. He was likable. So yeah. In part, he played the role.
Yeah, because this movie, it relies a lot on him being kind of like goofy, kind of like chill.
Goofy but cool.
Yeah,
like, he's still cool.
And for a long period, it's not until the end. He's pretty benign for most of the movie.
Yeah.
in everything that he
Yeah.
does. He's a victim of this, situation. He didn't really participate and he just got spit out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is an alternative universe where Eric Stoltz did go through with this film and it flopped.
Yeah, right.
Uh, do we ship? Because we always ask, do we like ship the couple? Do we? I mean, I could ask about Marty and
Who,
his
Marty and his
girlfriend.
mom? What
Yeah,
couple are we
like
talking?
I can ask about Marty and his girlfriend, but I feel like she's kind of a like I
He's
forgot
Oh,
never
Jenna.
that
there.
she had a girl. He had a
Yeah,
girlfriend in this movie. I was like, oh yeah.
right. He is total device.
But
I
do
think
we ship George and Lorraine?
I ship them to the extent in that I want Marty to exist.
Yeah,
But
Yes.
George
George
was
kind of
peeping on
sucks.
her. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like
We'll just say that he
that's
matured out of that peeping stage.
yeah, but oh God, but there's such like
But
a
it takes a certain
darkness to
type of
that.
person to, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. To the extent that I want our protagonist to exist in his
Right.
future. Yeah. I
When you
think
look at
that's
that dinner scene in the beginning where dad is eating brittle, and
Yeah,
watching, honeymooners,
yeah.
Lorraine says to him, "What was it, George, that you were doing, you know, when dad hit you with the car?" And it was bird watching, maybe was that what the
yeah, bird
I think
or
so,
watching.
yeah.
binoculars and whatever. Yeah, and obviously he knew. So right then and there, he's lying to his wife of many years about how
Uh-huh.
they met and what he was doing. Or he's just
Yeah.
absent-minded, but that's kind of how they play it. But yeah, I mean, he's withdrawing information right there and being dishonest with her.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hmm. Yikes.
yeah.
Well, what's he gonna do? Say, I was peeping.
Peeping on you. Yeah,
Okay,
it
now the
is.
Yeah.
families, that's changed everything.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I kind of feel for Lorraine. I guess in this new future, she's like really happy, but it's like I mean, yeah, she's a horny teenager who wasn't, like that's kind
Yeah,
of the joke, right? But like
Yeah.
she's this beautiful, kind of vivacious young girl, and then like George is like such a cartoony dweeb,
yes,
and it's kind of like she could do better,
a
you
lot
know?
better.
Yeah.
Well, I
So
mean, she argued that, right?
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
It was only out of sympathy for him getting hit by the car that it happened.
yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So at least now I guess it's like a future where he saved her, but still. Um, and then I guess we talk about like Doc is a fun character, great
Mhm.
mad scientist. And then Biff as our antagonist
He serves a
he's
purpose, I guess.
Yeah, right
yeah,
with
Yeah.
everything wrong.
he's definitely not one of our most iconic villains. Like especially right after like Cinderella month with all those like iconic stepmothers or
Yeah.
I feel we haven't had a lot of great because Supernatural Romance Month didn't have a lot of great villains either. Like
No.
that vampire that was in the last 20 minutes of Twilight. You're like, who's this?
I mean, I
Yeah.
think part of the antagonism in this film is the whole time travel and
Yeah.
figuring
Yeah.
how to fix and not break it more, you know?
He's his
Yeah.
own antagonist because
Yeah,
he creates the
situation.
grandfather paradox that
He's
could
his own worst enemy.
challenge
Yeah.
his existence. Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
It's
and to go back to Doc, I actually think that he has one of the best performances in the whole film because his function in the story is to carry like all the information
yeah.
for a
Yeah.
movie that could easily have been weighed down by information, and he still
As I
does.
demonstrated today.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And he does it in a way that is like motivated, and the performance is incredible. I mean, if you look on the page of how much stuff he has to deliver exposition wise, and how he does it in such a way that it feels light and it feels motivated, it feels like it's coming from the heart. That's a really hard thing for an actor to do, it's just carry all that information.
And
My
to be
favorite
really
part,
charming while doing it.
yes,
You
my
know, to be a
favorite
beloved
part
character.
is literally when he's like, I'm gonna do this thing, and then you're gonna see some serious shit. It's
Yeah.
like that's his explanation of what's about to happen. It's like charm instantly.
Right. But there's also another little dark moment there when he's doing that. Marty steps away because he doesn't want to die,
Yes.
and he pulls him back in. Remember, at this point in the story,
Yes.
um, his nothing has worked, right? So
Yeah.
this is an
Yeah.
experiment. He's risking his dog's life, his life, and now he wants Marty to stay there by his side and die with him.
Oh
And
gosh.
Uh-huh.
that's basically that's a 50-50 shot here,
That's
maybe more than that.
yeah.
They're all dead.
My boyfriend and I were talking about that because he was like, well, no, clearly Doc already tested it because otherwise he would have killed himself. And I was like, no, look,
No.
he just said that like he was so surprised when it worked. I was like,
Yeah.
he could have killed them. And
Yeah.
my boyfriend was like, oh my God, I thought that
Yeah.
he had tested it already. I was like, nope. Because he already said Einstein was the first human being or first being to
To
time
time
travel.
travel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, no, he did not know this was going to
And the
work.
There's
car's coming at them at like 85,
Yep.
there's
And
some article out there. Doc Brown is the real villain of Back to
yeah.
the Future.
It's by BuzzFeed. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was thinking, like, what is this movie really saying? The one I came up with is that we're more like our parents than we
Yeah.
realize, because even though George and Marty are so different, they still have that fear of rejection that he needed to they need to get over.
Mhm.
Um,
But
Or
I
there's
don't know if
also that about what they need to get over is the theme of like don't be afraid of rejection,
Mhm.
go for it and
yeah,
you'll come out better.
which
Um,
Yeah.
I think then they could do more time travel. I think it would have been fun to see him like do something with his music at the end,
yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
be like, oh, this is what.
Can you
Send
do
it
better
to
than inventing Chuck Berry's song?
True.
yeah,
That's
really.
that's up there.
Yeah, he could have sent his thing to the record company.
The
But
only
it was too late, like because Doc was already there, like we have to go on a new adventure. He didn't even have
yeah.
time to decompress from that.
Yeah, has he
Uh
even peed since he
oh
came
my
back from
God,
the
yeah,
80s?
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Also, I think something else that it's saying is that like sort of exploring the idea of what if you could be friends with, your parents, or what if you could
Yeah,
know
well,
your
yeah,
that was
parents
the
when they were
inspiration.
younger, right? The
Yeah.
inspiration. And I think that is like very clear in this that like he's getting to know his parents as young people, like his
yeah,
age. And not even just like the fact that like they're similar, that it's like, oh, they're different from what I
yeah,
thought they would be. They're whole ass people, you know?
yeah.
So
Which is it's like one of those maturing aspects of life, but to me, it's been a very rewarding aspect of life is to kind of, you start to piece together all this information your parents have kind of
Yeah.
given you and like craft like, oh, and then this happened and now this caused you to do this. And like you piece together the whole story of their lives. And it's like, oh, like they're whole
Yeah.
ass people.
Yeah.
yeah.
Something I had a really cool experience like that in October. I my Neither one of my children have never been to LA. And I mean a large portion of my life I lived in LA. I have a whole life there. And I also go back there often. So
You had a motorcycle.
this is true. So so I brought one of my kids back to LA and we went to like places that like like there were stories that were told about where we lived and we lived on the beach in Santa Monica and like all these different things and we went to those places and it was like wow, I could see Hayes, my child, like piecing together like oh my God. We went to UCLA where we lived at one point right next to UCLA and went to restaurants that are still there. So it was really neat. And I also introduced, Hayes to a lot of my friends there. And so it was like a whole life that I had, before they were even born. That was
Yeah.
pretty cool to introduce. So yeah, that is kind of a neat thing.
Yeah. I mean, even just like I remember when I was in Boston, it was like we were driving to the graduation party
Oh,
like at
right.
your house, and my mom was like, "Oh, I lived in the like this is right. I lived down this street, and there was this mailbox and blah 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 blah." Like,
Yeah.
like just
Where did
pointing
your
things
parents grow
out.
up?
So, I mean, my dad's from Michigan, but my mom grew up in South Weymouth.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And so,
Yeah.
and my grandparents are both from Boston or lived in Boston a long time.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
so like I'd call my grandparents and she'd be like, "Oh, we got like your grandpa was so drunk and we were at this chapel for like mass and
Yeah.
midnight and like all this." So like she's like, "You gotta go check it out."
That's so cool.
Um, So I guess takes us to our final question after another time travel cul-de-sac. Was that your fantasy, Hannah?
I love this movie. It's been a really long time since I've seen it all the way through because there were parts I'm like, I did not remember this. But yeah, it's such a fun movie, and even with like the faults that we've talked about, like you do kind of have to take it in a time capsule and be like, okay, we don't accept that now. But like the premise of it is just it's so silly, and yeah, it's a fun ride. It's a great romp for sure. So, yes.
I thought the question was asking, like, is that specifically your fantasy that you'd want to go back to 1955?
Yes.
I mean,
Do
you can
you
kind of
want
take
your
that
mom?
question.
No,
My answer
no,
is no to that.
no.
Yeah,
But
I kind
just
of feel like that 1955, I don't
I
know,
couldn't go
maybe you
back
can cut
there.
this out, but that to me is like what people are referring to when they say make America great again.
Yes,
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
that's a time that I think a lot of people look at and say it was innocent. It was like, okay, it was racist, it was sexist, it was like
Yeah.
it
there
was
was
innocent
we
because
were,
the people saying that were literal
yes, because they weren't
children.
affected by all that. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
benefiting from all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, the same time this movie came out, Emmett Till was
Yep.
lynched
Yeah.
in the same state, right? Was it
Yeah. In California. It
so
was in LA.
yeah, there's a movie that came out, a TV show, sorry, that came out I think a couple years ago. I don't know if you guys have seen this, Them.
Mm-mm.
I
Was
it is
uh,
really well done. I don't know if it's everybody's type of show. It
Mm.
is about a black couple moving into Compton, which at the time in 1953, so close to this time, I think it's 1953, moving into Compton, which was an all-white area, and the white people trying to push them out. And it's
Mm.
done as like a Jordan Peele-esque type
Oh, I
mm,
have
movie.
seen the trailer for
Oh
this.
my God. I actually, if you ever watch it, don't binge this show.
Mm.
yeah.
It'll change you.
Yeah.
It's like the kind of thing where you need to watch one episode and digest it. But I
Mhm.
just think it's so incredibly well done for something that's just, oh my God, no one's ever done anything like this.
Yeah.
So that show is tapping into the same exact time as this very whitewashed world of,
Mhm.
probably in the same state, maybe miles away.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, I mean, I guess I love Back to the Future.
Mhm.
It's up there as a favorite, especially for its time. But I definitely wouldn't want to go back to 1955. Place that wouldn't be when I would go back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not my
I mean,
fantasy, but it's I'm into the film.
I think I would have to travel into the future, given just hoping that the future
Are
is
you
going
a
to be
little
better.
worried?
Because I mean, I can't go back. You know, it's bad enough right now. So I
Yeah.
could never go back in time as much as I would want to go to different times
Yeah.
and experience just a little bit of, I guess, what I think it would be. But I mean, once you get there, like, ugh, toilets suck, or there's no
Yeah.
plumbing,
Yeah.
or,
If I actually had the flux capacitor at my, you know, if I was
Yeah.
able to get into that DeLorean, I think I'd pick a time where I could actually have an impact. And
Yeah. I'd probably stop Columbus.
mm,
I
wow,
that's a,
think you gotta go. I think people always go to World War II. I'm like, you gotta go
yeah,
before that.
you're gonna
yeah.
sacrifice toilets and go all the way back to prevent Columbus. I love that for
Even
you.
a bucket or
Thank
something.
you.
Like,
Yeah, to be a
Yeah.
chamber
what
pot,
was so
I
bad about
guess.
toilets? Like they're just a
Well,
hole
I mean, the
in an outhouse.
sanitary issue,
Oh
like
yeah, right.
everything's dirty. Like, don't
I'm
get a
very
paper
You
into
can
cutter
end
and
up
being
dying
go.
of
clean.
dysentery before you even able to change the
Yeah,
world.
I know. I'm just gonna tell Queen Isabella, I'm like, don't do it. I'm
Yeah.
from God and I'm saying not to do it. And
Oh,
yeah,
you're an angel.
I'm an
So
angel. So
yeah,
it'll either work, I'll be burned by the
they
Spanish
believe anything
Inquisition
back
because
then.
she did the
But you
Spanish
need to prove
Inquisition.
True.
something, so you need to go back like in time, and then
Hmm.
you need to go back a week before that so that you can tell
Yeah,
her something that's going to happen a week from now so that
There you
she'll
go.
start ready.
yeah.
Otherwise,
I
she's just going to
could
kill you.
I could show the record to be like years later you will have him arrested because you're so horrified by everything he did.
Yeah.
So maybe just
Yeah.
well, you don't have to do that. Um
Or maybe they think you're a witch.
Right. They definitely would. I mean,
uh
they didn't believe in science, vampirism was like considered people
yeah.
coming from the dead, like, and when it
Yeah.
was really smallpox that was happening. You know, they weren't
Yeah.
really rooted in science. So
Yeah, and I'm tall, so that would also. And when
Hmm.
I filmed a movie in an
what
old
would that be?
house and I
Yeah.
like could barely get around, and this is when I
Oh,
was like
right.
15. So I mean people
Yeah.
were that tall back then, but it would be like, who's that?
He's a
Yeah, right.
giant.
I would say like as a movie, this is my fantasy because it's a fun romp. It's a good time. I think time travel hurts my brain. So time travel as like a fantasy, I'm like, let's put that on the shelf because that hurts. Um,
There's, yeah,
Yeah,
I
you
mean,
decided to do a podcast where half of it is about time travel.
if you couldn't tell from the research, this was like Hannah's like, we're gonna do time travel, and I was like,
you're
that's
like,
great
okay.
because
You're
I
like, what's
wanted
the lore? And I was like, oh, I'll find some.
you'll find some. Yeah, I was like, well, I wanted Cinderella twist in time, so let's do.
It was so perfect. But
Yeah,
yeah, this was so much fun. I'm so glad
yeah,
we watched this movie and got to hang out with you, Scott. It was
Yeah.
great.
yeah.
I feel like this
Thank
whole time, Hannah, you've been like at the center of your background and you look like
you. Oh,
help.
I was gonna start the podcast like that, but it's better that I ended it like that. So
so before Hannah gets sucked into a wormhole, Scott, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you want to plug?
My child and I just started an Instagram that is connected to a short film that we're working on together. I
nice.
think I told you, Colin, about the fact that we're
Yeah.
shoot a short film. So they just created this Instagram like I think a week ago. So it's probably got one follower. So we're gonna climb the ladder. You know, this is so we're there's an article being done on the script coming out like I think in a week or so.
Ooh.
So there'll be some things that happen, but it's I think I wrote it down. A Free Martin dot short. So
Cool.
Free Martin is one word, FREEMARTIN.
Awesome.
And it's a short that's a proof of concept for a feature. And we're hoping to shoot it in August. So
Nice.
Coming
yeah,
up.
it's been just kind of a passion project that we've been really excited about. We don't have the money to shoot it yet, so we're still working on that part.
Yeah,
But we're getting
that's
close.
awesome.
Yeah,
Can you tell us
it's
a
a
little bit
ton of
about what
fun.
it's about?
Oh, absolutely. If you're interested, I don't want to.
Absolutely.
The log line is a 14-year-old and her girlfriend run away from home after fears of their relationship has been discovered.
Mm,
So it's only a 15-page piece. And so we wrote I wrote a feature and then we went back and forth and kind of redeveloped that piece. So we had a feature that we actually got an offer to option from somebody, and we really wanted to co-direct it. Like we really want to do this because we want to do it, not because we want to make money off of it or anything. And so we asked them if we could co-direct it, and they were like, no. And we're like, okay, as respectful as we can be here, because I mean, I understand. They said you don't have
Yeah.
any directing together. You've done nothing. So why would we, spend that money? So we're like,
mhm.
fair enough, but we're going to respectfully step away and say, no, we don't want to. And so people are like, okay, that's great, but now what are you going to do? So it had been recommended that we do a proof of concept short to show that we can direct. So then we had to figure out what's the story going to be? So the story takes place when they're 14 years old, when the feature is actually when they're 18. So this is the beginning of their relationship, and they decide that they're going to bolt. Spoiler alert, I'm going to give away the ending of the story. They decide they're going to take off because, she feels as though she's not accepted for who she is, and her partner is going with her to support her, but she really kind of just wants to stay and
Mm,
say we are who we are. People just need to deal with that shit. And so what happens is they don't end up leaving. They get caught, and kind of like the journey changes their mind, so they decide to stay in town. And then the feature is them staying, and so she gets another chance to leave when she's 18, and she's going to be leaving high school. It kind of mirrors you know Hayes growing up as a queer child, and kind of navigating through that, and me parenting, and you're navigating through that as well, is certainly something that kind of like interests both of us. And so we're like, it's the kind of what if I wasn't accepting as a father? What would that be
Yeah.
like for you? So it wasn't like I wasn't accepting, at all. But it's just kind of like the stakes, which are enormous for,
Yeah.
growing up in a small town and having your own, not feeling welcome in your own home. So I think Hayes said it best, was like, it's about the troubles of not feeling welcome in your home, but it's also about the joy of like the purity of queer relationships at like age 14, where it's,
Mm.
Yeah.
there's just a purity to it. So when they run away, we really get to see them without the world's eyes on them. So it's a much
Mhm.
more, we get to see their pure relationship, without all that. With also the fear still that they're running away
Yeah.
because they don't feel accepted. So yeah, we wrote this short, and I mean, it was kind of in our own little vacuum. And I think, Cullen, when I saw you, I
Yeah.
think that's when it started like blowing up. I
Yeah,
mean,
it was right before you just went to LA to do
yeah,
some
that's when
meetings
I
and
went to
stuff.
LA with Hayes, and it won first place at Slam Dance. Um,
Nice.
Huh?
yeah, and so we've gotten about $7,000, and then we just got offered cameras and
Mhm.
lenses, which is another like 5,000 worth. So we're about at 12,000. And I mean, when we won one of the festivals, we got like a producer that came and sat like mentored us. And I mean, I'll
Mm.
admit, I know nothing about making modern day like making films right now. I was a film student a long time ago,
Hmm.
recording film. And she was like, "How much are you going to make this movie for?" And I said, "I don't know, 5,000." And she goes, "No, you're not." And I was like, "Okay, so how much does a movie cost now?" So it's
Yeah.
like just around $20,000 to make it, which is like, so, and we're trying not to use our own money. So we're not, also Hayes is not as big a fan of like Kickstarter and using like friends' money, whatever. So we're trying to
Hmm.
get money together from either investors or competitions. So we've
Yeah.
gotten 5,000 from various competitions.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, it's been a ton of fun. Like working with your own child in a creative way has been so much fun. Like it's been very positive. I mean, we are completely honest with each other, but good things have come out of it. So yeah,
Sure.
it's been so much fun. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm really excited to
And it's all
see it
just
come
like
to fruition.
it was all just kind of like a side hustle kind of fun thing, and now it's slowly
Hmm.
becoming a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
It
Yeah.
is really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for sharing all that and for being here
Yeah,
for
Yes.
yeah.
our
Hopefully I shed some light on something. I
Yes.
don't know, but
So if you're watching on YouTube, hi, hello.
hello.
Reminder to smash that like button and please subscribe and hit that bell notification to get notifications of when we post next.
Yeah.
You can also follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Not My Fantasy Pod. And what should people do on Apple Podcasts, Hannah?
Oh, they should give us a 5-star review because my research was excellent. But
Truly,
no,
truly.
definitely give us that 5-star review and leave like the actual comment in the review, even if you're using emojis to describe how you feel. You could even just say hi. That just helps us find more awesome listeners just like you. And also leave us a comment on this video. Do you think it's an alternative universe or do you think it's the same timeline? What do you think?
Yeah.
Send off in the comments. Let us
Question to the
know.
people. Yeah. And then tune in next week for a very different time travel movie. We're talking about Kate and Leopold.
Hmm. A classic.
A
Very,
classic.
very fun, weird movie. And Meg Ryan. I mean, come
Meg
on. Queen
Ryan.
of rom-coms. So
Truly. I've
I'm
never seen
excited.
it, so I'm excited.
Oh,
Yeah.
but yeah. So again, Scott, thank you so much.
thank you. I'm honored to be a big part of this. Yeah.
Yeah, I
We're
mean, the
honored to
person
have
who
you.
created it all, this
Yeah.
friendship, this podcast, you know.
All right.
All
Bye,
right.
listeners.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much.